Welcome back to Anime T23. Today, we begin an extraordinary journey into an alternate reality where Naruto's path takes an unexpected turn. In this new world, Naruto seeks something beyond the hidden leaf: freedom, peace, and perhaps love. What if, in the midst of chaos, Naruto discovers love beyond the hidden leaf? Join us as we explore this alternate reality, where bonds are tested and new adventures beckon. This is Anime T23's What If Naruto Leaves the Village and Gets Married? Part 1. So, Arrow Sennin, what jutsu are you going to teach me? Naruto excitedly exclaimed, as he was practically bouncing all over the hotel they were staying in. Jiraiya merely shook his head with a grin as he watched his apprentice hardly control his excitement. It had been a little over a week since they began their training journey, and since then, Naruto's excitement had been all over the place. They had reached Tanzuka Town a little over an hour ago, when Jiraiya said Naruto's training would begin soon. Since then, Naruto hasn't stopped pestering Jiraiya to hurry up and begin his training. "Now hold on a second, Gaki," Jiraiya jokingly demanded. "I have to get in touch with one of my contacts here in Tanzuka, so I can't begin your training just yet," Jiraiya finished, as he looked at Naruto's now somewhat depressed form. "But Arrow Sennin," Naruto whined. Jiraiya held up a hand signaling Naruto that he wasn't finished. Naruto reluctantly quieted down, waiting for the Toad Sage to finish speaking. Jiraiya, seeing he had Naruto's attention, continued, "Though I personally won't be there to oversee your training for the moment, I want you to practice the Rasengan Dash." Jiraiya would have continued, but Naruto interrupted him. "But I already mastered the Rasengan," Naruto yelled out. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes before he spoke. "Oh, really? Did you master the Rasengan to the point that you can create with one hand instead of having a Shadow Clone's assistance?" He asked with a raised eyebrow and amusement dancing in his eyes. That made Naruto fall silent for several moments before he spoke. "But my Rasengan is fine as it is," Naruto exclaimed, anger lacing his voice. Jiraiya sighed as he shook his head. "So you're telling me you're going to let your hand get cut every time, so you can use the Rasengan?" Jiraiya questioned. Naruto fell silent as the battle with Kabuto and Orochimaru flashed through his mind. He only managed to get Kabuto with the Rasengan because he let his hand nearly get stabbed with a kunai, just so he could hold Kabuto in position. "And that's why I need more jutsu," he stubbornly yelled. Jiraiya's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're telling me that the jutsu created by the Yondaime Hokage isn't good enough?" Jiraiya quietly and slowly said. In that moment, Naruto froze. He had forgotten the Yondaime had created that jutsu. He knew he should feel honored about having such a technique. Shame welled up inside him as he just basically insulted his idol. Jiraiya, seeing Naruto's shame, lightly frowned. He didn't mean to make him upset. Then again, Naruto was always a little over-emotional. Just another thing he would have to correct during training, it seems. "Anyway, Gaki, I know a way for you to master the Rasengan faster than you normally would, and train at least 5 times as fast," Jiraiya stated with a grin forming at the end. Naruto snapped his attention in a moment, his shame all but forgotten. "Really? Arrow Sennin," he excitedly exclaimed. Jiraiya twitched at the jab of his hobbies, but forced himself to not react to Naruto's insult. After all, soon he would corrupt Naruto and turn him into a pervert of epic proportions. The very thought made Jiraiya grin in anticipation. Meanwhile, in Konoha, Tsunade suddenly felt like beating Jiraiya into a bloody pulp until he begged for mercy. "Yeah, Gaki, usually this method would be extremely dangerous. But seeing as you're the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki combined with your massive chakra reserves, this training method would be great for you," Jiraiya explained. Naruto's excitement could be seen from a mile away as he was literally bouncing up and down at the very notion of mastering the Rasengan twice as fast. And lowering the time for training was just as good an opportunity to pass up. "Well, don't just stand there, Arrow Sennin. Tell me already," Naruto shouted. "I don't know if I should Gaki. After all, you are being such a disrespectful Gaki." Jiraiya grinned. No matter the outcome, he was going to tell Naruto about the training method. He just enjoyed getting a rise out of his godson. Naruto stopped and stared at the elder man before he clasped his hands together and gave his sensei the puppy dog eyes. "Please?" "Ero-sensei," Naruto begged, throwing in a little whine at the end. Jiraiya mocked sighed in disappointment. "Well, I guess that's as close as I'll get." He frowned in a fake manner, while inwardly he honestly didn't Naruto to call that, even though he threw an arrow in his now new title. "The secret is quite simple, Naruto. The answer is..." Jiraiya paused for dramatic effect. Naruto was basically on the edge of his seat. If he was in one, the answer is... Shadow clones Naruto. Naruto face planted on the ground. "Ero-sensei, how will shadow clones help?" In response to Naruto's question, Jiraiya created a shadow clone. "Now create a shadow clone Naruto." Naruto quickly complied and created one. Then Jiraiya had his clone escort Naruto's clone into the forest. Naruto watched in confusion. After several moments, he gave his perverted teacher a glare, while his hands immediately went covered his crotch. "Hey, what's the big idea? Why did your clone kick my clone in the nuts?" Jiraiya merely grinned at Naruto while waiting for Naruto to realize what happened. Naruto blinked for several moments before he stared at Jiraiya in confusion. "Hey, Ero-sensei, what was that?" Jiraiya went into lecture mode as Naruto called it. "The Shadow Jutsu is a B-rank Kenjutsu for a reason, Naruto. You see, not only does it require Jonin-level chakra, reserves, it sends a mental feedback to the user, allowing the user to gain the Shadow Clone's experience," he explained. Naruto stared at Jiraiya with a starry gaze. "You mean..." Naruto trailed off in a hopeful and excitement tone. "Yep, we're going to utilize the full capacity of the Shadow Clone Jutsu to train you." Jiraiya grinned. "Get some clones, create a Gaki, and get to work on truly mastering the Rasengan." Naruto didn't waste any time in creating a small army of Bunchins and getting straight to work on mastering the Rasengan. Jiraiya gave his godson a proud look before he quietly left his student in the clearing. Naruto panted in exhaustion as he knelt in the clearing. It was already nearing nighttime as the sun was beginning to set over the horizon, casting the sky in a blue, orange, and red hue. The entire day he had trained with the help of his clones to perfect the Rasengan. It may have taken the whole day. But finally, after creating so many clones, and after dozens of failed attempts, Naruto could proudly say he can finally create the Rasengan nearly instantly with one hand. Naruto gave a prideful grin as he held out his hand, and formed a Rasengan almost instantly. One formed in his hand. The blue, spiraling sphere always fascinated Naruto. The way it spiraled constantly, the bright glow that it gave, and the way it was perfectly round and big enough to hold in your hand. It didn't look so dangerous, and yet it was one of the most feared jutsu in the elemental nations created by the Yondaime Hokage, second only to the Yondaime's famed Hiraishin. Just as Naruto was going to dismiss the Rasengan, a clapping sound echoed across the clearing, followed by a soft and enticing voice. "Well, that was quite amazing. I was watching you the entire day, and I still can't believe you're still here. Not to mention you didn't give up no matter how hard it seemed." The second Naruto heard the voice, he spun around to face the person who startled him, and his breath slightly hitched in his throat, while a slight blush crossed his features at the sight that was before him. There, standing the branch of a tree, was a girl even prettier than his Sakura. No, scratch that. This was the most beautiful girl he ever saw, period. She long silvery white hair reaching just past her knees, tied in into two pigtails on the sides of her head, held by black ribbons with Heim-style bangs. Two bags framed her face and stopped at her chest. Her face was heart-shaped with smooth pale skin, a small and cute nose, pink eyes with slits for pupils. Her eyelashes were slightly curved and long, and her lips were pink, and Naruto could tell it wasn't lipstick, they were naturally like that. And her mouth was set into a teasing smirk, as if she knew he was admiring her beauty, and she wasn't afraid of you admiring her as long as you don't undress her with your eyes. And Naruto was certain he saw slightly longer and sharper than normal canines. But he was probably imagining it, right? Another thing he registered was how petite she was, but strangely it seemed to suit her and just add to her beauty. She wore a black shirt with dark red spiraling bats on the back. She had gray shorts that reached her knees, leaving the rest of her slender legs exposed. She had black sandals with dark red strappings. She had a belt wrapped around her waist that held an assortment of pouches. Naruto didn't know what they held, but he assumed they were kunai and shurikens in there. At least he thought so. Once he was done taking in the girl's appearance, he just stared. And the girl just stared right back with that teasing smirk still on her face. Soon Naruto just pointed his finger at her and shouted, "You were watching me the entire day," he exclaimed with widened eyes. The white-haired girl giggled cutely. "Is that a problem?" she asked in teasing manner, as if she wasn't just spying on someone. "Is that a problem?" "Of course that's a problem. You can't just spy on people," he shouted, pointing at her in an accusing manner. "My name is Shiroy. What's yours?" she asked, completely ignoring his reaction to her spy watching. No one told her what to do. No one. Naruto, completely forgetting the fact she spied on him, instantly grinned and pointed his thumb at himself. "My name is Uzumaki Naruto, future Hokage of Konoha, Databeo." Shiroy tilted her head slightly. "Databeo?" she said with an elegantly raised eyebrow. Naruto sheepishly scratched his head. Sorry, it's a verbal tic," he sheepishly chuckled. She blinked several times before she giggled. "I think it's a little cute," she said with a grin at the end. This time Naruto knew he wasn't imagining things. She really did have longer and sharper canines than people normally did. They looked like small fangs. Fangs! He shuddered at the possibilities of her biting someone with those. Suddenly Naruto felt the Kyuubi's presence in the back of his mind. So she's one of that kind," the Kyuubi muttered. "Kyuubi? What are you talking about?" Naruto cautiously questioned. The Kyuubi debated on whether or not he should tell Naruto what he knew. After a short few moments, the Kyuubi gave a vague answer, deciding to let his container to figure out the rest. "I'll give you a warning, Gaki. Be careful with that bloodsucker," Kyuubi stated. "Now be gone and never bother me again, unless you want me to tear the flesh from your bones, human." He suddenly roared before he retreated back into his cage to get more sleep. Naruto inwardly winced at the Kyuubi's roar before he turned his attention back on Shiroy. What did Kyuubi mean when he called her a bloodsucker? "So, what's someone like you doing way out here?" Shiroy asked with that smirk still on her face. Naruto stared at her. "Training," he answered simply. Shiroy raised her eyebrow again. "Really? That's interesting." Before she reached into her pouch, Naruto tensed. Was she going to attack him? Was she pulling out a weapon of mass destruction? And of all the things he was expecting, he wasn't expecting her to pull out a white handkerchief. What? Naruto blinked in confusion as she held out the handkerchief and let it fall to the ground beneath her from her spot on the tree. He stared at her, and she in turn gave him an expectant look. He tilted his head again in confusion. Shiroy sighed in annoyance. "It is considered gentlemanlike when you pick up a girl's handkerchief." She deadpanned. Naruto made a O with his mouth in understanding before he moved towards the handkerchief, never seeing the growing smirk on Shiroy's face. After Naruto picked up the handkerchief, he looked up the tree, preparing to hand Shiroy her handkerchief. Only problem was she wasn't there anymore. Before he could comprehend what happened, he was suddenly sent flying through the air until he roughly hit the hard ground. "Itai!" Naruto said in pain. He winced as he felt a couple of his bones crack, but didn't have to worry as the Kyuubi already started on healing his injuries. After several moments, he was nearly fully healed. He attempted to stand, only to find that he couldn't. He opened his eyes, never realizing he closed them, and was treated to the sight of Shiroy straddling his prone form, while her arms holding down his arms. He gained a growing blush at the action. Shiroy giggled slightly as she watched the growing blush on his face. "What are you doing?" Naruto stuttered. Shiroy smirked The thing is, I need a little snack, and you're the only person around here. Not to mention my instincts tell me that your blood would make a good snack for now." She explained, "Oh, but don't worry. I won't kill you. It's just a snack I'm having. This won't take longer than 2 minutes, I promise." She cooed before she began to lower her face. "W what? And now H, hold on a minute. W what or why you talking about?" Naruto asked in confusion and panic as she continued to lower her face. "And were those fangs getting longer?" "Sure, it's okay. This won't hurt a bit," the silvery white-haired girl said, as her eyes glowed slightly with a pink light. Naruto shivered as her breath was tickling his neck. However, before he could question Shiroy on what she meant, he felt a dull pain in his neck before it faded. He tilted his head to see Shiroy with her mouth on his neck and blood slightly dripping from the area where her mouth was. Naruto paled slightly as he realized she was actually sucking his blood. He felt a surge of panic before he forced himself to calm down. Just remain calm. It's not like she was going to stay there forever, right? Shiroy was enjoying heaven right now. The blood was just so 0,000 good. It was the most delicious blood she ever tasted. It was quite literally better than anything she ever tasted, and she tasted some of the most delicious food in the world. And the best part, his blood was regenerating faster than she could drink. He quite literally had a limitless supply of blood. "I can stay like this forever," she thought in a daze. Her eyes glazed over, and a feral gleam entered her eyes. She held on to him a bit tighter in order to press herself against him, almost as if she were trying to melt into Naruto, and Naruto watched with a confused manner, while he also blushed up a storm. He was blushing a shade of red that it would have made Hinata proud, though the feral quality was a bit disturbing to him. He just hoped that she would stop soon. After all, he felt like she was probably doing more than just drinking his blood. He had no idea just how right he was. Shiroy, still in her feral state, only had one thought running through her mind. Her instincts were demanding that she mark him as her mate. They demanded that she make him hers, but she knew she couldn't force him to. She didn't know why her instincts were telling her to make him her mate, but she knew that her instincts were never wrong before. Her best bet would be to get close to him and get him to fall for her, and maybe, just maybe, she could see why her instincts demanded to make him her mate, though she did have a method of truly knowing him. But she didn't like doing that. Not only was it an invasion of privacy, it was a total mindfuck. But damn it, her instincts were screaming at her to disregard her morals. But she wouldn't. She wouldn't become a slave to her instincts. She wouldn't review Naruto's memories without his permission. They were his memories. She had no right to see them without his permission. However, again, her instincts didn't agree with her, as they still demanded that she mate with him. No. Bad instincts. Down. I will decide whether or not he will be my mate, and I will only review his memories if he lets me. Am I clear? She shouted in her mind. Her instincts hissed their displeasure but backed off, and so the feral quality in her eyes faded. Shiroy, having her fill of blood slowly detach from Naruto's neck, a single trail of saliva and blood connecting the two before it snapped. Naruto, now positive that Shiroy was done, slowly sat up while Shiroy stayed straddling him. "You Shiroy, see, could you get off me, please?" Shiroy grinned, exposing her fangs. "What if I like staying like this, she asked in an amused tone. Naruto didn't take notice of the amused tone as he panicked. Wait. I didn't mean to offend if you like staying like this. It's just I'm a little uncomfortable. And you, please don't hit me," he shouted with his hands immediately moving to shield his head. Shiroy blinked stupidly. "Why would I hit you?" Naruto peeked at her from his defensive position. "Usually when I did something stupid or when I stammer in my sentences, Sakura would hit me." Shiroy noticed the slip of tongue he had. However, she felt a coursing rage flow through her when she heard of how this Sakura would hit him over the most trivial of things. Her instincts came back and demand she find the girl and devour her blood until she was a lifeless husk. But she held in her rage and calmed herself, though she made a mental note to see who Sakura was when she reviewed his memories. If he allowed it, of course. I'm not going to hit you, Naruto-kun, the silvery white-haired girl said, with a warm smile. Naruto looked into her eyes and saw the truth behind them. He grinned stupidly before he posed a question. So, Shiroi, why did you drink my blood? Isn't obvious? Shiroi deadpanned. I'm a vampire, she stated with a prideful grin. She noted how Naruto looked at her with widened eyes before a grin erupted from his face, much to her surprise. So you're an awesome super strong vampire, like the ones I heard of in books. Naruto shouted in excitement. I always wondered what it would be like if I met one. To say Shiroi was shocked was an understatement. He wasn't afraid of her. He's not afraid of me, she thought in bliss. So, what type of super cool powers do you have, Shiroi-chan? Naruto asked in curiosity and excitement. See-chan? Shiroi thought with a slight pink hue to her cheeks, not that Naruto noticed. Well, vampires have various abilities that are extremely useful. Seeing Naruto about to shout in excitement again, she caressed his cheek to calm him down because 1, she didn't like being interrupted, and 2, she just wanted to caress his cheek. Though that seemed to have a different effect on Naruto, seeing as by caressing his cheek, she was also caressing his whiskers. The result? A deep rumbling noise from the back of Naruto's throat. Dead silence in the clearing after that. Naruto because out of embarrassment, and Shiroi? Well, the dam was beginning to break. For a reaction so horrible, so terrifying that even whispering it made men everywhere cringe in fear and despair. Kawaii! The silvery white-haired vampire screamed as she glomped our blonde protagonist. Yeah, that was the reaction we were waiting for. Naruto blushed again as Shiroi pressed her cheek against his while their bodies were practically grinding against each other. However, they were both interrupted by a short and perverted giggle coming behind them. Naruto froze. He knew who that giggle belonged to. Shiroi, of course, didn't know, so she slowly turned her head behind her to give the person her evil eye just for interrupting her moment with her new favorite blonde. Jiraiya shivered when Shiroi gave him her evil eye. Dear sweet Kami-sama, are those eyes glowing? Jiraiya thought. It was as if those eyes were giving him a warning to back off now and pretend he didn't see anything. The slitted pupils were adding an even more intimidating effect. Hey, Ero-sensei, this better not be going into your damn perverted books. Naruto exclaimed with the accusing finger pointed at Jiraiya. That snapped Shiroi out of her glaring as she rose an eyebrow. This was Naruto-sensei? However, what caught her attention was the books Naruto said he wrote. She only knew of one book series that were so famous and perverted. She should know. She read the first book, and she immediately wanted to castrate the man who wrote it. And there he was, standing right there, the writer of the accursed Aika series. She slowly stood with aura of malice and hatred as she smiled sweetly at the man. You're the author of Aika, correct? She asked with a sugary, sweet tone. Jiraiya gulped but nodded with a bit of pride. Wait, pride? Oh, hell no, you're not allowed to feel pride because of what you wrote, you perverted old bastard. She raged in her mind. Naruto-kun, I suggest that you do not watch this, she said with same sweet tone as before. Naruto couldn't even move because of the fear she was feeling. And so he was forced to watch as Shiroi beat his sensei into a bloody pulp, while also kicking him in the crotch with bone-shattering strength, allowing the man's screams of pain to be heard all across the elemental nations. In Konoha, a certain masked jonin was walking down the streets reading his orange book, until an ear-splinting scream echoed across the sky. Kakashi stopped and looked up at the sky. I sense a disturbance in the Aika, he muttered. The people who heard him looked at him weirdly. Tsunade looked up from her paper when she heard the ungodly scream echoing across the village. Tsunade-sama, Shizen, her assistant exclaimed as she barged in the office. What was that? She questioned Tsunade's side that. Shizen was the sound of a man losing his most precious items. She explained with a dark smile at the end of her sentence. Shizen shivered at her master's smile before she slowly inched away from her. Shiroi walked away from the twitching mass of blob that was once the toad Sanine. She walked back towards Naruto with a wicked smile and satisfied look in her eyes. Naruto-kun, she began with the wicked smile still in place. Why, yes, he answered with a fearful expression. He did not want to end up like Jiraiya, even if he had to be Shiroi's slave. Don't ever end up like your sensei, okay? She spoke softly, with a warm smile at the end. Naruto merely nodded, with a growing blush on his features. Shiroi's smile widened before she gave Naruto a soft kiss on the cheek. The blonde-haired boy's eyes widened as his face went so red that Hinata was jealous, because it was even redder than hers. A giggle was heard again. Shiroi snapped her attention to the massive blob, only for it to disappear in a puff of smoke. She scowled as she saw the real Jiraiya enter the clearing unharmed. Man, you gotta love shadow clones. Though I'm not fond of the experience it transferred back, he said as he grinned with grimace on his face from the clone's experience. Note to self, never get her angry, he thought. Shiroi smirked at the grimace. So, Naruto-kun, why are you traveling with this pervert? Shiroi asked with curiosity and barely concealed contempt for the author of that accursed Aika. Naruto grinned. It's because he's my sensei. He's going to be teaching me a lot of awesome jutsu, Shiroi-chan, he explained with excitement. Shiroi gave Jiraiya a glare, and Jiraiya knew what that glare meant. It meant that if he tried to corrupt Naruto and turn him into a pervert, she was going to castrate him. He sighed in disappointment. All of that planning on getting Naruto fixed on his perverted ways. Ruined. He inwardly cried anime tears. Shiroi, seeing Jiraiya sigh in disappointment, felt a surge of female anger. That pervert was actually going to try and corrupt her Naruto. Wait, when did Naruto become hers? It didn't matter, because she actually liked the idea of him belonging to her. And, god damn it, when she wanted something, she'll get it. So if she wanted Naruto, then she was going to get him. When she got him to fall in love with her, she'll make her move. She just had to be patient. Jiraiya noticed the predatory gleam in her eyes as she looked at Naruto, and he inwardly smirked. Naruto really needed a girl in his life. Plus, he needed to get past that other girl, Sakura. In Jiraiya's opinion, the pink-haired girl didn't deserve Naruto's attention. But this girl, maybe she can take Naruto's attention away from Sakura. Okay, Gaki, you can hang out with your girlfriend another time. It's time to rest up in a hotel, because we're leaving Tanzaku first thing tomorrow, Jiraiya stated. Naruto stuttered as the notion that Shiroi was his girlfriend. I mean, why would a girl as beautiful as her want him as a boyfriend? The stray thought depressed for a moment. Shiroi didn't deny the girlfriend joke. On it was the opposite, really, as she found herself giving Naruto a predatory grin. Uzumaki Shiroi. It has a nice ring to it, she blissfully thought. Well, time to go, Gaki, Jiraiya said before he turned to Shiroi. I'm glad you kept my student company. Kami knows he needed it. Jiraiya grinned. Shiroi tilted her head slightly. What did he mean by that? Okay, bye, Shiroi-chan. It was nice meeting someone as awesome as you, Naruto said in slight disappointment. Shiroi grinned. Hey now, you didn't think you two were the only ones traveling the elemental nations, did you? She playfully asked. Jiraiya and Naruto looked at each other before Naruto gave Jiraiya a look. Jiraiya mock sighed in annoyance when inwardly he was jumping for joy at the prospect of his student becoming a couple with the silvery-haired girl. Then how would you like to travel with us? Shiroi? Was it? The white-haired Toad Sannin asked. Shiroi eagerly nodded at Jiraiya's question. Then welcome aboard. Shiroi-chan, Naruto shouted in excitement. Shiroi giggled, while Jiraiya muttered something along the lines of inspiration for my next book. That made Shiroi's eyebrow dangerously twitch before she reined her temper, and followed the Toad Sannin and his apprentice. It had been over 6 months since Shiroi joined the traveling duo, and she must say they were both entertaining and amusing, what with their quirks and whatnot. She now understood why her instincts wanted her to mate with Naruto. He had such conviction, loyalty, determination, courage, and bravery that not just anyone had. As time passed, she actually found herself falling for him. He was quite literally the perfect mate. The fact that his blood was delicious was only a bonus, even when during training, when Jiraiya demanded he do something that seemed impossible, he would whine at first, but would comply and do the exercise without complaint. And with his method of training, he was quickly growing stronger at an alarming rate. Every day he would create small armies of shadow clones to learn chakra control, and chakra theory that the Toad Sage had him work on, while he himself trained his body. And because of his physical training, he built up a rather excellent body build. His muscles were not too big and not too small either. They were the perfect mixture of both. Shiroy had to restrain herself from jumping the blonde and there. Also, his hair had grown out, making him have to keep it a low, spiky ponytail, much like Jiraiya, only much shorter, and two bangs stopping at his jawline. Unknown to Naruto, he looked much like his father with his new look. After 3 months of that routine, Jiraiya switched it up. He taught him taijutsu stances and had him use and train it on his own, while his clones worked on learning some wind-based ninjutsu. Jiraiya had over his shinobi career. They had checked Naruto's chakra nature, and to their surprise it was wind, a rarity in the land of fire. After that, it was simply a matter of getting some wind-based ninjutsu for the young blonde. So far, Naruto mastered wind style, air bullet, and wind style, great breakthrough. The others were taking a while, but he was getting there. The real challenge, however, was getting Naruto out of his orange monstrosity, as Jiraiya called. Naruto stubbornly refused for a good 2 days, before Shiroy decided to talk with Naruto about it. Jiraiya didn't know what happened, but Naruto came back with a blush and glazed expression on his face, while Shiroy had a pleased look and a predatory smirk on her face. Jiraiya knew that look. It was one that spoke victory and satisfaction. And so they had the blonde try out various outfits, but one of them worked. However, Naruto picked clothes he actually liked other than orange-related clothing, and they were surprised with what Naruto picked out. They had Naruto try it on, and they both agreed it was an excellent choice. The clothes here weren't things a shinobi would normally wear. But then again, Naruto was always different and unpredictable. So imagine their surprise when Naruto out with his new robes on. They were largely gray in color. Accompanying this, the robes also had a gray-white fur padding on the left shoulder, and Naruto chose to wear a dark orange scarf around his neck. The robes also bore the Konoha insignia and a small, adorned buckle in a shape of diamond, which connected the belts which crossed over his chest. There was also an upside-down Konoha insignia on the tip of the hood that was made onto the robes. Additionally, small patterns appear to be imprinted on the gray fabric of the robes. Ezio's outfit in Assassin's Creed Revelations, except the scarf is dark orange, and the Konoha symbol is where the assassin symbol should be. Also, Naruto had long since stopped wearing his headband since he got his robes. He preferred to allow his insignias on his robes to let others know whose side he was on. Thus his bangs fell freely into his eyes at times, but it was no bother for Naruto. In Shiroy's opinion, it made him hotter than he was. Both Jiraiya and Shiroy agreed that the new look was amazing and the outfit was best for Naruto. All in all, Jiraiya was most pleased with Naruto's progression. By his estimate, Naruto should be low Jonin level, though with experience he will no doubt be high Jonin level. However, Jiraiya was certain that when Naruto's training trip was over, he would be at Kage level shinobi, if not higher. He just needed to progress more and gain experience, and he will no doubt be one of the strongest shinobi in history, second only to Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Madara. Speaking of progression, what really progressed over those 6 months was Naruto's relationship with Shiroy. At first, it just them being simple friends. Then gradually over time, they spent more time together, learning about each other, and finding their favorite hobby of showing their displeasure with Jiraiya whenever he was peeking into hot springs. Then they began to go on dates. It was awkward at first, but they managed to dissipate the awkward air with talking, going to dinner, and finally watching the sunset together. Then the two were basically inseparable. And every time a girl would give Naruto an interested look, she would glare at them until they looked away. Jiraiya tried to separate them at one point, and he ended getting thrown through a wall by Shiroy while Naruto kept glaring at him for a whole hour. He didn't even blink, which creeped Jiraiya out. They learned a lot of things about each other. Shiroy learned that Naruto, despite having idiotic moments, was actually surprisingly cunning and smart. She learned he played pranks on his entire village, which made her laugh hysterically at the pranks he pulled. He loved ramen. His dream was to become Hokage, and that he would do anything to protect his precious people, as he put it. Of course, she asked if that included her, even if it was a joke. His answer made her heart swell with love and admiration for the blonde. I would protect most of all, Shiroy. After all, you are one of my most precious people. That was his answer, and it warmed her heart to hear that. And Naruto learned a lot about Shiroy in turn. He learned she loved sunsets and the moonlight that bathes her at night, which made sense seeing as she was a vampire. She loved drinking his blood, which had become hobby, so pretty much Naruto isn't affected when she drank his blood. Her favorite food was caramel apples, because in her opinion it is both a sweet and healthy fruit. And she absolutely adored foxes for some reason. That earned her some points from the QB. As such, the QB silently approved of her mating with his container. He learned that she hated snakes, wolves, raccoons, and arrogance. When asked why all, she was, "You try being surrounded by a shitload snakes, wolves, and raccoons, all of them hungry, mind you. And the reason why you were surrounded by them in the first place is because you were the arrogant." Naruto nodded in understanding and left at that. However, after 6 months, Shiroy was finally going to ask Naruto if she could review his memories after all. She was starting to get curious on why Naruto was always a little reluctant on the subject, which led to their current situation with Shiroy sitting in front of Naruto with her legs crossed while they were just outside the outskirts of Shakuba town, a fair distance away from Konoha. Jiraiya had left them so he could meet with one of his contacts when both Shiroy and Naruto knew he was just going to go peek on women in the hot springs. Shiroy let him go because she wanted to be alone with Naruto when he asked him her question. "So, what did you need me for?" "Shiroy-chan," Naruto asked with a tilt of his head with his eyes showing curiosity as he removed his hood from his head. He had gotten a habit of keeping his hood up at all times. When asked why, he merely said he wanted to keep the mysterious air around him. Plus, it was funny watching others try to see past his hood by carefully trying to peek under it. Shiroy looked Naruto dead in the eyes, showing the seriousness of the situation. "Naruto, I have a little trick that will let me see your memories. I would like to see them, that is if you'll let me." She decided to just get out with it and be blunt about it. Naruto hesitated, and he uncertainly looked into her eyes. If she wanted to see his memories, then that would mean she would learn about Kyuubi, which she began hating him just like the rest of Konoha. He couldn't bear it if she began hating him. After all, he had fallen for the girl a while ago. She was just so beautiful, kind when she wanted to be, and she had a strong personality. If she began hating him, then Naruto would forever give up on love. Inside his mind, Kyuubi snorted. The girl was a vampire, and vampires were always treated as outcasts by humans. As such, she would judge him just because he was in his container. The boy had trust issues, the Kyuubi decided. Shiroy, seeing Naruto's distraught and hesitation, smiled reassuringly. "It's okay, Naruto-kun. I promise my opinion of you won't change," she assured. That was all Naruto needed to know, as he nodded with resolutely. "So, how does this work?" "Shiroy-chan," he asked. "It's quite simple. You see, for vampires' blood is our primary source of strength. It heals us faster than we normally would. It replenishes our strength when we are exhausted. And at times, if we have enough, we could temporarily become a Shinso vampire." She lectured. Seeing she had Naruto's attention, she continued. "Another useful ability is to see the memories of the person we drink blood from." She explained. "How does that work?" Naruto asked with a raised eyebrow. "I don't really know, to be honest. All I know is that it's all about genetics in our DNA. Apparently, somehow our blood stores our memories. I don't even know how's that possible." She shrugged. Naruto merely sighed in annoyance. That would have been useful to know. "So, what do I have to do?" Shiroy grinned. "Isn't obvious?" She deadpanned as her canines grew longer. "Of course," Naruto blankly said. However, he had a smile on his face when he said that. He removed his scarf, and exposed his neck by tilting until his bare neck was exposed to the world. Shiroi didn't need an invitation, as she crawled towards Naruto like a predator stalking its prey. Once she reached him, she sat in his lap and placed her mouth near his neck. "Ready?" she whispered. She felt Naruto nod, and she sank her fangs into his neck. Like all the other times Shiroi bit down on his neck, he felt a dull pain before it faded. Shiroi prepared herself for the memory backlash that was sure to come, and she was right as she felt her mind drifting away at a speed so fast that it could have surpassed the Hiratian. Soon she was in a sewer, like place with water dripping at random intervals. She raised an eyebrow in confusion. What the heck was this? She noted how there were faintly glowing blue bars scattered around the ceiling. She assumed that was his chakra, but what was that red one? She shook her head. She had more important things to do, like finding a door labeled memories. So she wandered and wandered and wandered until her eyes started twitching. Where the fuck am I supposed to go? She shouted in anger and frustration. The red bar glowed brightly before a small ball of red chakra appeared in front of her. "What?" she muttered. The red orb just flew around her for a moment before it moved down the tunnel and turned right. Shiroi, with nothing better to do, simply followed it. After countless seconds of following the strange little ball, she saw it stop at a white door with a gold plating labeled memories on it. She looked at the little orb and gave it a thankful look. She watched as it moved back to the red bar, and the red bar reabsorbed it like water. She looked at the door, took a deep breath before she entered it. Inside, she dozens of screens. She looked around in confusion before the little orb of red energy came back and positioned itself over a small button, which said "Start" at the bottom. "You're really helpful, aren't you, little guy?" She giggled before she turned her attention on the button. She pushed the button, and so her torment as she watched Naruto's first 12 years of his life. She could do nothing but watch as food vendors harshly threw him out of shops without even a second glance. She watched as he was kicked out of the orphanage at the age of 5. She watched the beatings he received for simply walking down the street with a small smile. She watched as he tried to play with other children, only for their parents to take them away and glare at him with contempt and hatred. She watched every single detail, not leaving anything out. She watched his happiest moments to his moments of despair. She watched everything, all the way up to his training trip with Jiraiya. When it was all over there was an eerie silence in the area. Shiroi's bangs overshadowed her eyes, and soon an aura of pure malice and hatred erupted from her. She slowly lifted her head, and her slitted pink eyes were glowing a menacing pink. Her iris and pupils disappeared, and all that remained was her menacing pink glowing eyes. Her aura began getting darker. Kyubi watched in interest as her aura became even darker and more malicious than his. If the Kyubi were honest with himself, he would admit to feeling a small shiver of fear going through his spine. But he shook it off. He was the king of the Bija, damn it. He didn't fear anything. He quickly retreated deeper into his cage. Not because he was afraid. It was because he was bored. Yes, bored. He wasn't afraid at all. Shiroi slowly formed a snarl on her face before she faded from the mindscape. For Naruto, it had only been 2 minutes before she noticed Shiroi slowly detach herself from him. He was about to greet her. That is, until he noticed the furious snarl on her lips as her fangs grew longer than before and her aura of malice bloodthirst burst from her form. Everything about her at the moment screamed one thing: fury. Sheer, unadulterated fury and rage. A loud growl emanated from her throat as she glared maliciously in the direction of Konoha. "Shiroi-chan, calm down!" Naruto shouted. "Kill, kill, kill," was the only thought going through Shiroi's mind. Her instincts begging, pleading, demanding that she go to grounds that Konoha laid upon, and to burn it to the fucking ground. A furious growl erupted from her lips as her eyes glowed dangerously brighter. She felt something grab her hand, and her head snapped towards Naruto's direction, only to see him worriedly squeeze her hand in a reassuring manner. "Shiroi-chan, please come back to me," he said with a pleading tone. Slowly, Shiroi's features returned to normal. Her pink iris and slitted pupils returned. Her canines returned to their normally usual longer and sharp length, and her aura of darkness and malice disappeared, though she still held a silent rage in her eyes. "Why don't you hate them?" She began softly. "If it were me, that village would have been burned to the ground a long time ago. So why don't you hate them?" she asked in desperate confusion. Naruto smiled warmly at her. "Because if I lash out and kill them, then I'm no better than them," he explained. Shiroi looked at him silent amazement. "Do you recall when Ero-sensei spoke to us about hatred in this world?" Naruto began. Shiroi nodded. She remembered that conversation. "My dream is to become Hokage, not only to earn my village's respect and recognition, but to protect those precious to me as well." Shiroi's eyes widened, but Naruto paid it no mind as he continued. "Ero-sensei said that there was too much hatred in this. I want to do something about this hatred. I still want to become Hokage, but that can wait. My new dream is to rid the world of this hatred that has been brewing for a long time. It may seem impossible now, but I know true peace can be achieved. So if there is a such thing as true peace, then I'll seize it." Naruto shouted with a bright smile. Kyuubi listened to Naruto's speech in interest and a slight, hopeful look in his eyes. "Naruto, are you the one old man Rakuto spoke of?" the Kyuubi thought. Shiroi stared at Naruto in admiration and awe. This boy, no, this man was truly something else. He was a gift from Kami-sama which others took all for granted. She decided, this was the only male worthy of becoming her mate, the only male she would ever touch, and the only one she will truly love. "Naruto," she lovingly said. "Yes." He tilted his head in confusion. He didn't have time to react, as Shiroi's soft pink lips connected with his. His eyes widened for a moment, before they slowly closed, and he leaned into the kiss. The kiss began to get more heated, as Shiroi straddled him, while their tongue battled for dominance. In the end, Shiroi won because her feral instincts provided her with the edge she needed. She eagerly explored Naruto's mouth to all of its contents, getting a small moan from Naruto. After 3 minutes, she pulled back with a trail of saliva, connecting them before it snapped. "Wow," Naruto uttered. "So, what does this make us?" "Shiroi-chan," he asked. "Lovers," she happily answered, as she rubbed her cheek against his, thus rubbing his whiskers as well. Naruto could only purr in approval as the sensation of her rubbing his whiskers kicked in. Jiraiya, with his back against a tree, looked up at the sky, seemingly looking at the heavens. "Minato Kushina, you would be so proud of your son if you were here," he thought in pride and contentment. A perverted expression crossed his face at the thought of catching both Shiroi and Naruto in the act, but decided against for his own safety. He happily began thinking of what he was going to teach Naruto next. Perhaps I'll teach him wind manipulation. That way he can find a way to complete the Rasengan. Then I'll teach him some meditation. After that, I'll let Pa take for sage training. And for the rest, he'll take some A or B ranked missions. With his new training regime for Naruto completed, his form disappeared in a burst of speed, deciding it was best he let the newly formed couple enjoy their time together. Jiraiya was currently facing something so horrible, so frightening, and possibly suicidal if he keeps trying to talk his way out of it. What could Jiraiya possibly be doing that was so frightening and horrific, you may ask? Well, the answer was quite simple. No, we just became a couple, and now you want us to be separated for an entire month, just for some stupid sage training. I refuse to allow it. The answer, ladies and gentlemen, was the feminine fury of a girl. Now, keep in mind that this wasn't any other girl. This girl was a super-powered vampire with the power to quite easily destroy a normal human being. Now, of course, when dealing with shinobi, it would be understandingly tougher to kill them, seeing as shinobi seem to defy all logic. Seriously, these guys really defy logic. I mean, bringing the dead back to life, WTF. Surprise face. Now you might be asking why Shiroy was so angry. Again, the answer was oh so simple. Let's start at the beginning, shall we? After Jiraiya had left Naruto and Shiroy alone for their quality time, as he called it, though he just wished for his student to man up and lose his virginity already. Anyway, shame on you, Jiraiya, for having such naughty thoughts. Getting back on track, he called upon the elder sage toad for Kasaku, or as he called him, Pa. He called upon the elder toad sage after he finished peeking on some hot springs. And Jiraiya immediately got to business and stated he wanted him to train Naruto in Senjutsu Chakra, after he mastered wind manipulation training, of course. And with the way Naruto used shadow clones, he had no doubt he would master wind manipulation in about 2 months tops. This led to a small argument on whether or not Naruto was ready for sage training or not. After several hours of debate, Pa agreed to teach Naruto the ways of the sage if he deemed him worthy. After that, Pa simply vanished in a poof of smoke. Then Jiraiya decided to see how his student and new girlfriend were doing. The scene he saw when he reached the spot where he left them made him giggle in a perverted manner. Hey, don't look at Jiraiya like that. You would probably giggle too if you saw your student and his girlfriend cuddling in their sleep. And I don't mean the normal kind of cuddles. I'm talking about the one where you are quite literally grinding against each other. The soft moans they were unconsciously releasing were not helping either. Thankfully, they still had their clothes on. Otherwise, Jiraiya would have died of a nosebleed. He tried pulling them apart so that he may drag them to town and put them to bed. Only problem was every time he tried, Shiroy would unconsciously try to kick him in the crotch. So he was forced to make camp there for the rest of the night. He may seem irresponsible, but he would never leave his student and his girlfriend alone in the forest. After all, there were a lot of shady characters out there, though he doubted they would get far what with Shiroy unconsciously attacking him in her sleep. So he set up a tent, a fireplace, and sleeping bags. Once satisfied, he attempted to place Naruto and Shiroy into a sleeping bag. Again, Shiroy unconsciously attacked him in her sleep, but Jiraiya, being stubborn, kept trying for several minutes, before suddenly a knife whizzed past his crotch. He was as pale as a ghost when that happened, and he wisely backed off after seeing Shiroy unconsciously reach into her pouch for another knife. He decided to just fuck it and go to bed, summoning a toad to keep watch while they slept. After that, his dreams were a blur of hot springs, women, and sake. The next morning, he woke up refreshed. He moved out of the tent to be treated to the sight of Naruto and Shiroy groggily waking up with somewhat aching backs, understandable since they slept on the ground. However, there was no need to worry as Kyuubi was already healing Naruto's back, while Shiroy's own vampire healing factor kicked in. Then all of their stomachs rumbled, signifying it was time for breakfast. Though Shiry claimed that her stomach did not rumble as she was a lady, and it was unladylike should that happen. Sight of Yuha, aching busy Jiraiya, being the gentleman that he was, created some clones to hunt for some meat, while he got the fire ready with a small fire-style jutsu. Several minutes later, his clones returned with couple dead rabbit and some deer. Kyuubi was inwardly jumping for joy at thought of his container eating rabbits. After they had cooked the meat, breakfast was a quiet affair with small talk now and then. After Jiraiya was done, and Naruto just finishing, while Shiroy was still eating, taking her time with her meal, Jiraiya began proposing his new training regime for Naruto. First, they would polish up on what he learned the past 6 months, and wrap it all up with a few more lessons and mastering the current wind jutsu he had given him. Then they would begin his wind manipulation, and possibly complete the Rasengan. When Naruto asked what he meant by that, Jiraiya explained that the Rasengan was an incomplete jutsu, as the Yondaime was planning on adding an elemental affinity to it. The very prospect of completing the Rasengan excited Naruto beyond belief. Then they would teach him the art of meditation. When asked why, Jiraiya quickly explained that he would need it. Then he would send him to Mount Mayaboku for a few months to begin his sage training. Now, this was around the same time as Shiroy finished her breakfast, not paying attention to the conversation in favor of savoring her meal. However, she finished just as Jiraiya said something about sage training. When she asked what he meant by that, Jiraiya, thinking Shiroi heard the whole conversation, quickly explained that he was sending Naruto to Mount Mayaboku for a few months to begin his sage training, which led to Shiroi's reaction almost instantly. "No, we just became a couple, and now you want us to be separated for an entire month just for some stupid sage training. I refuse to allow it," which led to Jiraiya dodging a various assortment of things being thrown at him, while also trying to talk his way out of the situation. Naruto himself began shivering in fear of Shiroi's wrath, a sentiment shared by the Kyuubi. No, the Kyuubi wasn't afraid. He was cautious. Yes, cautious, that's the word. "Wait, Shiroi. Stop throwing things for a minute and let me explain. Holy shit, was that a cow?" Jiraiya exclaimed. "M.O." The cow mooed as it flew through the air. Where the hell did she get a cow? Don't answer that question. It'll just confuse us more than we already are. Jiraiya opened his mouth to speak again, but his eyes widened in pure fear when Shiroi summoned her most dreaded weapon, the frying pan, a female's ultimate weapon of retribution. Jiraiya screamed like a little girl as the frying flew towards its speeds that would make even the Yondaime jealous. It was in slow motion as the frying pan slammed into Jiraiya's face. Time seemed to stop for a moment before it fast-forwarded, and Jiraiya was forced to do cartwheels in midair because of the force of the blow. The toad Sannin landed on the ground with a loud thud. Jiraiya pathetically moaned in pain as he got up. "What the hell are you trying to kill me?" he exclaimed with an accusing finger pointed toward Shiroi. Shiroi merely stared blankly at Jiraiya. You know, thinking about it now, it wouldn't be that good of a thought to kill Jiraiya, because not only would Akatsuki be all over Naruto with Jiraiya, but also who would train Naruto. Though she didn't like it, Jiraiya was the best bet for training Naruto. She just had to make sure he didn't try corrupting him when she wasn't looking. You hear that, Jiraiya? She's watching you, like a damn hawk. No arrow, Gigi. I'm just a little angry that you're planning on taking away Naruto-kun for 3 months after we just became a couple. She huffed. Hey, wait a minute. When did I say that? Jiraiya yelled in confusion. You said you were taking away Naruto-kun for a whole 3 months. Don't you dare lie to me. She snapped. Shiroi-chan? How much of our conversation did you hear? Naruto spoke, now sure that Shiroi's wrath was somewhat sedated. Shiroi titled her head in a cute and confused manner. To be honest, all I heard was something about sage training and a few months. She sheepishly answered. Jiraiya twitched before he sighed. First, I'm going to give Naruto the basics of wind manipulation. Then we're going to train him in that for at least 2 months. Then I'm going to give Naruto some lesson on meditation for however long it takes. After that, then I'll take Naruto to Mount Mayaboku. He explained. Shiroi blinked, before she sheepishly chuckled. Sorry, she said with a bright smile. 2 months she had with Naruto. Even though he would be gone to begin the sage training, she had no problem with it. Though a part of her wanted to go with Naruto, but she didn't want to seem selfish. But she can't help but wish to be able to go to Mount Mayaboku with him. She didn't want to be alone again. Jiraiya, seeing the sad look in her eyes for the split second it was there, made a mental note to speak with Pa, and see if she could be allowed in Mount Mayaboku as a visitor. Before we get to traveling once again, do you guys want to buy some things in town, or just browse to see if you want anything? This is your last chance, he asked. Shiroi shook her head no, having already browsed through the stores during their stay. However, surprisingly, Naruto nodded his head thoughtfully. Jiraiya rose an eyebrow, while Shiroi looked curious. Well, out with it, Gaki, Jiraiya said with a tinge of curiosity in his voice. Well, during our stay here, I saw something in a weapons shop that looked interesting, but I didn't have time to examine it well enough, the young blonde said. Jiraiya put his hand on his chin, seeming to be debating whether or not he should allow Naruto to buy the interesting object he saw. After several moments of debate, Jiraiya nodded, giving his student approval. Naruto grinned, before he quickly ran into town. Both Shiroi and Jiraiya blinked before they glanced at each other, and quickly followed the excited blonde. After several minutes of both Shiroi and Jiraiya looking for Naruto, They caught a glimpse of him entering a weapons store. They entered and were treated to an assortment of weapons of various types and sizes. However, they paid them any mind, as they quickly found Naruto, who was at the front desk, paying special attention to a pair of bracers on the walls. The bracers were somewhat interesting to them and a little strange. They consisted of what seemed to be a retractable blade that appeared to be in conjunction with a protective bracer. As such, it seemed the retractable blade could be discreetly extended or retracted, making it a valuable tool for assassinations. The hidden blades from Assassin's Creed except without the assassin's insignia. They had no idea what it was capable of, but it didn't seem capable of much seeing how it was so old and rusted. Naruto, however, seemed to be intently watching the bracers, as if they would disappear at any moment. He had no idea why, but he felt drawn to those bracers. He felt the Kyuubi's presence in his mind once again, seeming to come right when he was confused or needing a little help. "Tay, I'm surprised there were even a pair of those left. The hidden blades. Truly useful when performing discreet assassinations," Kyuubi uttered. "Kyuubi, you know what this is?" Naruto thought in surprise. "Of course I'm familiar with those things. A clan during the Clan Wars, and during the First, Second, and Third Shinobi Wars used them quite often before they were nearly wiped out," Kyuubi gruffly explained. "Specifically, the Uzumaki clan both created and used them often. Not that I would tell you that, Naruto," Kyuubi thought as he retreated into his cage. "I see," Naruto whispered. He spent several more minutes gazing upon it before he rang the bell and waited for the owner of the store to come along. "Why would you want something like that, Naruto?" "It looks like a huck of junk to me," Jiraiya gruffly said. Shiroy merely stared at the bracers, silently admiring them. Obviously, Jiraiya did not know the sentimental value and the time spent into making such an advanced type of weapon. It looked ancient and yet more technologically advanced than anything in the elemental nations. "How may I help you?" A raspy voice called out to them. An elderly gentleman now stood in front of the counter, his gray hair falling just above his shoulders. While wrinkles were nearly all over his face and forehead, he wore traditional red robes with blue feathers adorning the fabric. "Yes, you can." "Thank you for your time, sir," Naruto politely began. During his training with Jiraiya, the Elder Toad Summoner managed to beat respect for elders into Naruto's brain. "I've got all the time in the world, laddie. Now what do you need?" The old man warmly said, "Those bracers on the walls. How much are they?" Naruto asked. "Oh, you've got a good eye, lad. Not many people can see the true value of such an artfully crafted weapon like that. For years now it's just been sitting there, collecting dust. I'll tell you what, lad. I'll give to you for free if you promise to repair it and use to its full potential." "Deal," the elder offered with an old grin at the end. Naruto gasped in disbelief, but after several minutes he hesitantly nodded. The elder smiled happily before he removed the bracers from the wall, wrapped it around in a black cloth, and handed them to Naruto. "Remember your promise, lad," the elder reminded. Naruto nodded happily as sealed it into the storage seal he placed in his left arm. Once that was done, Jiraiya, Shiroy, and Naruto bid the elderly man farewell, and left the shop soon after that. Leaving the town, Naruto couldn't help but wonder how he was going to repair the hidden blades, as Kyuubi called it. Yes, the hidden blades. He couldn't help but wonder how he was going to repair something so complicated. "Seriously, I don't understand why we wasted our time with something as useless as those," Jiraiya grumbled. Naruto twitched. Jiraiya's complaints over the subject were really annoying him so far. It seemed that sentiment was shared by Shiroy as well, as she spoke in an annoyed and slightly superior tone to Jiraiya. "Shut up, Arrogigi. You just can't understand something as incredible as those bracers Naruto-kun bought. They may seem ancient and useless, but if you looked at them closely you would see that they are more technologically advanced than anything in the elemental nations." Jiraiya snorted, "Please, those things? Technologically advanced? Pfft, and I'm the pedophile who likes little boys," he said. While Shiroy and Jiraiya argued, Naruto tuned them out in favor of unsealing his newly acquired hidden blades and examining them. He silently groaned. Just how was he going to fix something like this? QB purred in thought. He could help his container with his dilemma, but what would he gain out of it? He watched as dozens of thoughts raced through his container's mind for several minutes before he sighed. He could not believe he was doing this. "Hey, Gaki," QB began. Naruto froze at the QB's voice before he relaxed slightly. "Yes." Naruto answered in curiosity. "I know of a way to fix those hidden blades," the massive fox uttered. "Really?" Naruto thought in excitement. "Yes," was the QB's short response. Naruto was so engrossed in his conversation with QB that he never noticed Shiroy and Jiraiya stopping a few feet away from him and glancing at each other in confusion. "Well, how do we fix it?" The blonde thought. "It's quite simple, Gaki. My chakra can heal you at alarming rates. What you don't know is that my chakra can heal or restore practically anything to its original state," QB explained. "You mean?" Naruto trailed off. "Yep. All you have to do is channel a little of my chakra into those blades, and I can return them into their original state and maybe add a few enhancements as well," he explained in a bored tone. "But what's in it for you?" Naruto suspiciously asked. "You are my container, and as my container, you represent me. So if you are seen as weak, then I am seen as weak. And I refuse to let that become a reality. I clear?" QB threateningly growled. Naruto nodded, not noticing when Jiraiya and Shiroy looked at him weirdly for doing so. QB grinned. "Excellent. Now just channel my chakra into the hidden blades and let me do the rest," he ordered. Naruto didn't waste any time in channeling a small sum of the QB's chakra into the bracers. Jiraiya's eyes widened at the actions, and he was about to scold him for such a reckless action when he noticed Shiroy's amazed expression. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow and looked towards Naruto bracers, and his jaw came loose at what he was seeing. It was almost as if time were reversing for the bracers. The rust, dust, and somewhat broken areas were being repaired and being replaced with shiny new metal. The retractable blades lost their jagged ends, and their edges became sharp once more, along with the point. This continued for several more moments before the bracers looked as if they were never broken in the first place, though everyone noticed a new addition to it. On the top of the bracers, a large orange-furred nine-tailed fox was on it with a grinning snarl on its face, while its 9 tails seemed to wrap around the owner's arm, seemingly to protect them. Naruto quickly put them on, and he noticed something strange. The bracers felt stronger than any metal he had ever seen or felt. He experimentally flicked his wrists, and to the amazement of everyone except QB, a foot-long blade extended from it. They all stared at it in awe and amazement. Naruto flicked his wrists once again, and the blade instantly retracted. Shiroy was the first to snap out of her stupor, and she gave Jiraiya a fanged grin. "So, how does it feel being pedophile?" she asked. Jiraiya twitched. "Okay, so I was wrong. Now get off my back." Jiraiya grumbled. Shiroy giggled, before she turned her attention to Naruto only to see him flicking his wrists, testing his newly acquired blades by having them extend and retract. Shiroy smiled at the expression of awe and fascination on his face. She looked up towards the sky. Things were getting interesting. "Naruto, stop playing with the damn blades. And Shiroy, get your ass over here. Let's get traveling already." Jiraiya impatiently shouted. Shiroy gave Jiraiya an annoyed look before she stepped beside Naruto. Naruto gave her a bright smile. She returned it, and they both followed the perverted Toad Sannin, just as Jiraiya expected. It had taken only 2 months for Naruto to nearly master wind manipulation. After they had polished on what Naruto knew, Jiraiya had immediately began his elemental manipulation training. At first it was frustrating and difficult for Naruto. Even with the help of clones, he still barely even got it down. The scrolls Jiraiya loaned him on wind manipulation weren't much help either. So Naruto, as stubborn as he is of course, kept trying, and every time he failed, he would become even more frustrated. Jiraiya didn't offer any advice. In his opinion, it was a good learning experience for the boy. And in his words, he won't be able to hold his hand forever and while he's in a fight. Shiry, however, was a different matter entirely. She scolded Jiraiya on not giving Naruto the help he clearly needed, and she claimed that if he wasn't offering Naruto's help, then she would help him. After that, she immediately went to help Naruto, never seeing the smile on Jiraiya's face. When she found Naruto, the stress and frustration was evident on his face. It just made more angry with the perverted toad hermit. However, she shook herself of her anger and instead focused on how she was going to help Naruto. Seeing Naruto about to try again, she immediately stopped him grabbing his hands and forcing him to sit down. Naruto eyed her in confusion as she began to give his shoulders a massage. He moaned in pleasure as she immediately of all his stiff joints and stress-induced muscles. While she gave a massage, Shiry began to give her idea on why he was having such difficulty on his manipulation. Naruto listened, wanting her advice. She explained that he was trying to control wind instead of guiding it. Wind was just as alive as him and her, so wouldn't it make sense that wind wouldn't want to be controlled? So she said to try and guide the wind. However, do not attempt to control. Naruto did just that, and to his surprise and Shiroi's satisfaction, Naruto successfully managed to split a leaf in half with wind chakra. Immediately a bright smile lit Naruto's face, before he gave Shiry a deep kiss to her lips and thanked her repeatedly. Shiry waved him off and said she was happy to help, though she did muse that if a kiss was going to be her reward for every time she helped him, then maybe she should help him more often. Naruto, of course, being oblivious, said he didn't have a problem with it if that was what she wanted. Shiry smirked mischievously and said why would she want that when she could take some kisses from high whenever she wanted and much more. The way she said made Naruto blush brightly as she looked at him with hungry and predatory grin. After that, it was simply a matter of creating a small army of clones to get to work. After nearly 2 months, he had nearly mastered wind chakra. However, he still wasn't at a level on where Jiraiya wanted him to be, but it was good enough, he supposed. Jiraiya decided to have 1 extra month before he would have begin Naruto's sage training. So he decided to have the extra month on having Naruto learn the art of meditation. But for now, Naruto earned a day's rest, which was why Naruto was currently in a hot spring, while Jiraiya wandered around the small settlement, probably looking for a brothel. Naruto sighed in content as he sat in the hot spring. These things were a blessing for all shinobi, of that Naruto was sure of. After all, a shinobi job wasn't easy. Most people assumed that a shinobi life was just training and doing missions to both get the village money and for the sake of glory. But Naruto realized that wasn't what a shinobi was. Shinobi were the protectors of their homes. They trained for the sake of the village, so that if it were attacked, then they would be strong enough to defend it. And shinobi accepted missions from various clients, so that they may experience the world outside the village walls, so that they knew what they needed to protect the village from. That was the purpose of missions. They were to show other shinobi that the world was all black and white. In the middle there was a shade of gray, and that shade of gray is hardly ever seen in this world. Naruto didn't know which side he belonged to. He wasn't in the white area seeing, as there is no white in a shinobi's career. He wasn't in the black area, seeing as he would never do such terrible things to others. Maybe he was a part of the gray, but also leaning more towards the white. He shook his head of such thoughts. He shouldn't be thinking of such things. Today he was supposed to relax, so he might as well start. He heard the door to the hot spring open, and he assumed that his perverted teacher had returned. So imagine his shock when he turned around and came face to face with a nude Shiry who wore a towel covering her body. He blushed brightly at how beautiful at the moment. The way her wet form seemed to glisten, the way her pale skin seemed to shine against the water. Her silvery white hair was out of her usual pigtails, letting flow freely down her back, made her seem even more beautiful in his eyes. And finally, her slitted pink eyes. Oh, those eyes made her seem exotic, and more unique than anyone he had ever met. Shiroy-chan, he began, finally snapping out of his stupor. "W, what are you doing?" He stuttered. Shiroi rose an eyebrow. Didn't you read the sign, Naruto-kun? It's a mixed bath today. She explained. Naruto tilted his head in thought, before his eyes widened. The owner of the spring said there was a mixed bath today, but he didn't pay attention. He suddenly felt like banging his head against a wall, but decided against it. He nervously turned to face Shiroi again, only to see her giving him a predatory look as she grinned devilishly. Do you like what you see? She began as she slowly stalked toward him, letting her towel fall as she reached into the water. It was fortunate for the young blonde that the mist was hiding Shiroi's form, though that didn't stop him from resembling a tomato at the moment. Once Shiroi was within 3 feet of him, she suddenly lunged at him. Naruto couldn't even be surprised by the sudden movement, as she already straddled him. Luckily for him, she wasn't to close his third leg. Well, do you like what you see, Naruto-kun? She seductively whispered, purposely drawling out his name. By this point, Naruto was so red that it would make Tomato plot to assassinate him. If they were alive, of course. Dash. He couldn't even form an answer, as his brain was frying from overload. Shiroi smirked in victory before she kissed him deeply. Naruto's mind blanked out, before he deepened the kiss on instinct. Hey, Gaki, I'm back, Dash. Jiraiya froze in the middle of his sentence as he saw the scene in front of him. Several moments later, he finally registered what he was seeing. Naruto and Shiroi were in the hot spring, making out naked. Shiroi and Naruto, in the hot spring, making out, naked. He flew back outside the spring with nosebleed of epic proportions. My student has finally become a man, he thought with a grin, before he went into a blissful state of unconsciousness. Back inside the spring, Naruto slowly separated from Shiroi. Did you hear something? He asked in a daze. I didn't hear a thing, she whispered, before he pulled him in for another kiss with her tongue, already forcing its way into his mouth. She won't go too far with what she was doing. After all, she already swore that she wouldn't have sex with until he was 14. He was 13 at the moment, so she had to wait. After all, patience was a virtue, though she had to constantly fight her urges and hormones whenever she was around Naruto. But she can wait for a whole year. I mean, a year isn't that long, right? Right? Damn hormones and female urges, she thought. Oh, how she wished a year had gone by already. Patience. She was really starting to hate that word. Naruto twitched at Jiraiya's grinning face. It had been 2 days since the event in the hot spring, and since then Jiraiya hadn't stopped grinning every time he was around Naruto. Whenever he wasn't looking, Naruto would hear the sound of a pencil scribbling down on a sheet of paper, followed by perverted giggling. However, every time he turned back right, Jiraiya would be innocently whistling while grinning at him with his eyes. It didn't help that Jiraiya kept giving him looks of pride every 5 minutes. It annoyed Naruto, to put it bluntly. He had to resist the urge to snap at the elder Toad Summoner on occasions. Shiroi, however, didn't have such restraints. On more than one occasion, Naruto had calmed her down when the elder Toad Summoner leered at them in a perverted manner. It had gotten so bad that Jiraiya stayed a good 5 feet away from Shiroi whenever she was near. Of course, that didn't stop Jiraiya from leering at them from a distance, while scribbling in his notebook, muttering things along the line of pure gold. It pissed them both off, to put it quite frankly. That's how it was for the past 2 days. Just the three relaxing and spending time together. Thought every time a girl gave Naruto a look, Shiroi would immediately cling on to him and gave him a stare that clearly said mine. Of course, Naruto was oblivious to it all. However, now Jiraiya believed it was time for Naruto to begin learning the art of meditation. Of course, Naruto didn't understand why he needed to learn something useless in his opinion. Jiraiya merely gave him a stern glare when he said that, and stated that even if meditation seemed useless, it would be extremely useful in the future. Which was why Naruto was sitting in front of Jiraiya with a deadpan expression, while Shiroi was sitting next to him with a blank stare. Both of their stares were directed at Jiraiya, as he was still leering at them with a giant grin on his face. Slowly, ever so slowly, tick marks began appearing over their heads as they simply stared, as he seemed to trying to control his giggling. That's it. Naruto finally snapped. Ero-sensei, why are we just sitting here? And for Kami-sama's sake stop leering at us, he yelled, before he flicked his wrist and his hidden blade extended. Or so help me. He trailed off in a threatening manner. Shiroy also bared her fangs and growled lowly at Jiraiya. Jiraiya merely sighed. Well, the both of you both passed and failed the test at the same time, he suddenly said. Naruto tilted his head in confusion before he retracted his hidden blade, and looked toward Shiroy, who was just as confused as he was. Jiraiya, seeing their confused expressions, sighed. You see, this whole thing, with you two just sitting there and me leering at you every now, and there was a test to see how much patience you have. Imagine my surprise when you two stayed like that for 30 minutes before your patience ran thin. He quickly explained. You two snapped after 30 minutes, which showed you have a good amount of patience. However, I was actually expecting you guys to last at least 50 minutes. He finished. Naruto blinked, while Shiroy rose an elegant eyebrow. Why was I taking part of the test, Ero Gigi? She asked. Well, I can't just have you traveling without teaching you, and I know you're not interested in shinobi techniques, seeing as you never spared them a second glance whenever I taught Naruto some. So I figured why not teach you something like meditation, so you can learn more patience, he said with a smirk at the end. Shiroy stiffened, before she growled lowly towards Jiraiya. The way he said patience had a hidden meaning to his tone. She twitched. How long had he known that she was holding herself back from jumping her blonde lover? She reluctantly nodded. She really did need more control. Even now she feel herself and her body begging, yearning, and demanding that she jump the blonde and perform adult acts. Jiraiya, seeing her reluctant nod, gave her a reassuring smile before he turned his head towards his apprentice. However, before we take our meditation more seriously, he began before he pulled out a blank sheet of paper. I want you to channel your chakra into this paper dash, but I thought we already knew what my chakra nature was. Naruto interrupted. Jiraiya gave Naruto a glare for interrupting him. However, he shivered when he felt another glare on him. He glanced toward Shiroy only to see her giving him a blank look, while her mouth was set into a frown. Though her face was set into a blank expression, Jiraiya could feel the dark glare she was sending him. He quickly gave Naruto a soft look, and immediately he felt the glare get off him. He inwardly sighed in relief. Sometimes that girl was too possessive over the blonde. Yes, Naruto, your chakra nature is wind. However, this is a different sheet of paper. This will tell us your second chakra nature. Naruto held a confused expression on his face. Jiraiya sighed. Before he began his explanation, you didn't think shinobi had one chakra affinity, did you? Most jonin have a second affinity. Some, if they're lucky, have 3, but that's mostly Kekkai Genkai users. Naruto made an O in understanding before he silently took the paper, channeled his chakra into it. The paper took a moment before it suddenly became soaked with water. Well, wind and water, huh? Interesting combination. Jiraiya softly muttered. Well, work on your second affinity during meditation. You'll just create some clones while you and Shiroy meditate with me, he said. Naruto quickly created some clones and had them perform some water exercises a fair distance away before he sat back down, with Shiroy already sitting right next to him. Jiraiya inwardly smirked, though Shiroy may be a bit too possessive, but in a way it was probably a new experience for Naruto. Jiraiya could tell that Shiroy would give Naruto extra attention. It was good for Naruto. It proved how much Shiroy loved Naruto. Shaking himself with such thoughts, he quickly instructed them on the best method of meditation. The trio then closed their eyes and breathed in and out. Soon they entered a state of self-awareness, and the only thing that can be heard was their soft breathing. Shiroy opened her eyes to see herself in the same sewer she was in when she saw Naruto's memories. She looked around in confusion. Just what was she doing here? She felt a pull, and suddenly she began to gently float off the ground, and moved towards one of the darkest areas of Naruto's mind. Several moments later, she entered a massive room. However, what caught her attention was the giant cage with the kanji for seal on the what seemed to be the lock for the cage. Slowly, a pair of crimson-red eyes with slitted pupils opened. Her breath hitched in her throat. She was in the presence of QB. She whispered. The QB eyed her for a moment before his demonic voice echoed in the area. "Do you know why I called you here, girl?" He softly growled. Shiroy dumbly shook her head. All she could think about was why she was here in the first place. QB seemed to sense her thoughts as he spoke. "The last time you were in here, I made it so that I could call upon you in here whenever I pleased." The nine-tailed beast explained. Shiroy gulped. "That answers that." "Why did you call me here?" she asked. QB lowered his head until he was at eye level with Shiroy. "I find myself curious about something, so I decided to indulge in my curiosity," he answered. Seeing Shiroy waiting for further explanation, he continued. "You see, you found out about me being inside Naruto a good while, yet your attitude towards him hasn't changed at all. If anything, you seem to love him more. Why is that?" he asked. Shiroy smiled softly. "Why wouldn't I love him? Naruto is such a great person, though he may have his moments of stupidity at times." QB snorted, which Shiroy glared at him for. "He is different from any other person in the world. His smile is enough to brighten anyone's day. He is truly one of a kind. And I will love him eternally. I will accept all of him, even you." She finished. QB rose an eyebrow, and what of those who heard him before, and those who are hunting him, and others like him? As soon as QB finished that sentence, Shiroy's aura of darkness and malice suddenly burst from her form. She slowly lifted her head, and her eyes were menacingly glowing pink, while the slits in her eyes began to get thinner and more demonic. Her eyes held such malice and burning white-hot rage that QB actually a shiver of small fear run through his spine. No, it wasn't fear. It was caution. Caution, I tell you. QB wasn't afraid of anything. It took a while for Shiroy to answer his question, but when she did, her voice was so cold and held so much malice that it would have frozen hell over. "I will make them suffer. I will show them true suffering. And when they are on their knees begging, pleading, crying, and broken beyond comprehension, only then will I kill them. Only then will I end their suffering, whether they be friend, ally, or enemy. Anyone who harms MY Naruto shall receive no mercy," she menacingly said. QB was not only stunned by her words, but he was also shocked by her aura. In the entire time she had been around Naruto, he could never get an accurate measure of her power. But now, as of this very moment, he truly knows just how strong she was now. She was just as powerful as the Gobi. However, it was the way her aura felt that stunned QB. Not only was it more malicious and ominous than his own, her aura was almost darker than... No, her aura was darker than Uchiha Madara's. Uchiha Madara is the only other being who had an aura darker than himself. But this girl, her aura was darker than anything he ever felt before. QB shivered slightly, though she wasn't as powerful as himself. The way her aura felt was enough to intimidate him, and he wasn't afraid, damn you. QB knew one thing, however. He pitied the poor fools who would incur Shiroy's wrath. Just looking into her eyes, he could tell she wouldn't even blink if she were to massacre an entire village if it meant to protect Naruto. Something tells me that if I try to possess Naruto's body so that I could break out of the seal, it would end badly for me, he thought. Suddenly, just like that, Shiroy's dark aura just disappeared as if it were never there, and she gave QB a fanged grin. "Is that all you wanted to see me for?" "QB-san," she said in a polite manner. QB's sweat dropped. Was she bipolar? "Yes, that all I wanted to talk about," he answered, nodded. However, before she left the mindscape, she looked at the QB as he retreated into his cage. "You know, if you want someone to talk to every now and then, I'm sure Naruto-kun wouldn't mind." "Shiroy," she said before she disappeared. QB purred thoughtfully before he shut his eyes. Shiroy opened her eyes, and was greeted to the sight of Jiraiya slowly opening his eyes with Naruto following soon after. "Well, how did your meditation go?" Jiraiya asked, standing up. Naruto grinned. "It's a lot more relaxing than I thought it would be, Ero-sensei," he answered. Both Naruto and Jiraiya turned toward Shiroy intent on receiving her answer as well. Shiroy merely gave them a fanged grin. "It was very fun," she vaguely answered. Naruto looked curious, while Jiraiya shrugged in a non-caring manner. "Well, I don't know about you two, but I'm starving," Jiraiya shouted, pumping his fist in the air. "Oh, let's have some ramen," Naruto excitedly shouted. "What? No way. We had ramen a month ago," Jiraiya argued. "Yeah, that was a whole month ago. Ero-sensei," Naruto responded back. Shiroy gave an amused smile before she mocked sighed in irritation. "Might I suggest that we purchase Naruto ramen while you purchase what you want to eat?" she suggested. "But the money we'll spend..." Jiraiya began looking like he was going to have a heart attack. "Don't be so cheap, Ero-Gigi," Shiroy smirked. "Ramen, ramen, ramen," Naruto excitedly yelled before he ran off into town. Jiraiya cried anime tears at the thought of spending so much money before he followed his student's example and slowly trekked into town. Shiroy giggled before she followed him into town at a leisurely pace. Maybe she could talk Naruto into letting her suck some blood as a snack. She grinned at the thought, and she suddenly began to stalk into the town much like a predatory. Her only thought as she entered the town was, "Where are you, Naruto-kun?" Her eyes gained a feral gleam as she caught the sight of Naruto's robed and hooded figure. She silently chuckled. It was so fun being with Naruto. The past month went by exactly as Jiraiya expected. The meditation for Naruto worked wonders. Before, Naruto had always been one who lost control of his emotions nearly constantly. Now, however, the blonde was no longer the loud and brash boy he was. He was now calm and always in control of his emotions. It takes quite a lot to get Naruto to react in a violent and brash way. However, even with his newfound calm and controlled attitude, Shiroy was still able to get him to blush like no tomorrow. Jiraiya suspected it was because Naruto still held his virginity. You would think that, wouldn't you, Jiraiya? And his training with the water element wasn't progressing very well, seeing as Naruto was paying too much attention to meditation. Jiraiya advised Naruto to train in his second affinity more often, but Naruto, being as stubborn as he has said, he would focus on it when he wanted. Of course, Shiroy didn't agree with Naruto this time, and so she forced Naruto to train more in his second affinity. And so Naruto reluctantly created more clones to train in his water element, as he did not want Shiroy's wrath upon him. With more time spent in to train his water element, he was able to learn few water jutsu such as water style, water dragon jutsu, water style, water prison jutsu, and water style, storm upheaval. A jutsu Jiraiya believed suited Naruto. He mastered 2 of them, and was currently working on mastering the last one before moving on to learning more of them. For Shiroy, the meditation was a godsend. Before, she had barely holding herself back from literally jumping the blonde in broad daylight. Now, however, she could safely say her lust for the blonde had been somewhat sedated. However, that didn't stop her from lusting after the blonde. Occasionally, when Naruto wasn't looking, she would give him a feral look of lust. Jiraiya obviously noticed, but never said anything. However, Jiraiya had 1 week left before he had to summon Fukasaku, so Hisachi was trying to decide on what to do. He had an entire week. What would he do? Wait, maybe it was time to tell Naruto about his family. No, not the Yondaime. He was planning on telling Naruto after Senjutsu training. He was talking about the Uzumaki clan. Who knows? Maybe they could pay a visit to the ruins of Yuzu. It was definitely worth a try. He got up and headed towards Naruto's chakra signature. And surprise, there he was chatting Shiroy. He sighed as he sat down and gave them both a serious expression. Seeing his serious expression, both Naruto and Shiroy immediately stopped their conversation and turned to him. For several minutes there was a tense silence before Naruto was the first to speak. Ero-sensei, what's wrong? Jiraiya sighed deeply. Naruto, I have not been entirely honest with you, he answered. Naruto and Shiroy exchanged glances before Shiroy spoke. What do you mean, Ero-Gigi? Naruto, I guess I should begin with a woman named Uzumaki Kushina. Your mother, he said. Naruto stiffened. Before he Jiraiya a look that said continue, while Shiroy had an interested look. Your mother was a part of the Uzumaki clan of Uzumaki. Not only was she a part of the clan, she was also the heiress of the clan. The Uzumaki clan were allied to Konoha since the beginning of shinobi villages. He began. The Shodaime Hokage had a wife in Uzumaki Mito, Kushina's aunt. The Uzumaki clan was one of the most feared clans in the entire world because of their sealing methods. No one could match their seals. Even the Uchiha clan were cautious of making enemies with the Uzumakis. Seeing Naruto strangely keep his mouth shut, Jiraiya continued. The symbol on the back of the jackets that Konoha has is a symbol of friendship between the two villages. During the Third Shinobi War, in a combined effort, IWA, Kyumo, and joined together to destroy and ravage the entire village, and the Uzumaki clan were scattered across the elemental nations. Your mother had already been in Konoha at the time. However, that's a story for another time. Seeing Naruto about to open his mouth, Jiraiya quickly continued. The reason I'm telling you this is because I'm planning on making a trip to Yuzu, and since that is where your family's home is located, I thought you and Shiroy would like to come. Who knows? You might find something useful there. He finished. Naruto was silent for several minutes before he nodded his head. Shiroy nodded her head as well, wanting to see the home of Naruto's family. Jiraiya smiled, stood up, and began sealing his equipment into a scroll, followed by Shiroy and Naruto. Let's get moving, then. Yuzu is in the land of water. It'll take us at least 3 days to get there at full speed, he said. Both Naruto and Shiroy nodded, and the trio instantly disappeared in a burst of speed, leaving behind a trail of dust. As Jiraiya said, it had taken them 3 days to reach Yuzu at full speed. The journey was interesting enough. A couple bandits tried to foolishly rob them. However, they made short work of them. When they took a short break in a town, they learned that the bandits were somewhat bothering the townspeople, so they took great pleasure in knowing they helped the town. When they were getting ready to leave, however, Jiraiya noticed one thing. He couldn't find Naruto. Shiroy immediately raged at claiming how he could lose his student and her lover. However, before things could escalate any further, Naruto mysteriously appeared behind and asked what was wrong. They quickly explained that thought they lost. Naruto rose an eyebrow before he said he was just standing by that fruit vendor over there. He quickly moved over to the fruit vendor again, and to both Jiraiya's and Shiroy's shock, it seemed as if Naruto melted into the crowd. It was as if he were never there to begin with. In fact, if Shiroy didn't have Naruto's scent, and if Jiraiya didn't channel chakra into his eyes for better vision, they would have completely lost sight of Naruto. When Naruto emerged from the crowd, Jiraiya immediately hounded him on how he was able to do that. Though Naruto said he didn't know how he did, just that he just did. Like instinct, Jiraiya immediately claimed it was a valuable spying technique, since if you were able to become one with the crowd like that, then you could easily eavesdrop on various conversations. Shiroy dubbed it as perfect blending. The QB was inwardly snickering, seeing as that was another skill that the ancient Uzumaki used, was a lost art after the clan wars began. Though since they were heading towards Uzumaki, QB couldn't help but wonder if Naruto would find that sword. The only sword possibly stronger than Orochimaru's Kusanagi, and said to be able to harm a Bijou. If he did find that sword, QB knew that Naruto would be both feared and respected by many swordsmen. That pleased the QB, as his container would be famous for even having the blade in his possession, after several stops on a few towns. Mainly because Jiraiya wanted to peep on some hot springs, but Shiroy threatened to castrate him if he did. They finally found themselves in front of the main gate of Uzumaki. Naruto looked at the gate with anticipation and uncertainty. Shiroy gently took his hand and gave him a reassuring smile, while Jiraiya clasped his hand on Naruto's shoulder, silently giving him support. Naruto gave them both a thankful smile before he touched that gate, and a blood seal that was on the gate glowed brightly before it dulled, and the gate opened on its own, allowing them entrance. Old decaying buildings, deserted streets, eerily silent buildings. The wind blew slightly. Even the wind seemed devoid of life, as if time had worked its way into even the wind. Faded signs that were labeled fruits, groceries, playground. They were various signs, all either burned, faded, or torn apart. Even bones littered the streets. However, they seemed to be on the verge of collapsing into dust and ashes. Jiraiya looked around with a grim expression on his face. He never knew that it was this bad. Shiroy looked around in slight anger and sadness. Anger because of what Kumo and IWA had done. Sadness because those obviously human bones were the kinsmen of Naruto. Naruto looked around in both sadness and slight depression. His family's ground all ruined, yet they seemed as if they were still able to stand. It seemed even the buildings had the stubbornness of the Uzumaki clan. Kyubi looked through his container's eyes, and he couldn't help but feel a sting of sadness. Though Kyubi may have hated humans, the Uzumaki clan were the only ones he truly respected. Their charisma and always fight till the last man standing attitude always made him wonder what life would have been like if the Uzumaki clan were still around. He remembered when he was first sealed, his first container Uzumaki Mito offered her hand in friendship. He had been angry at the time, because Madara had used him like a puppet. In his anger, he slapped the offer of friendship in her face. Thinking back, he couldn't help but wonder how much things would have changed had he accepted her offer. Well, we might as well look around. Lead the way, Naruto, Jiraiya said. Naruto looked at Jiraiya in confusion. I think that what Jiraiya means, that since this is Uzumaki grounds, you should lead the way. After all, this is your home. So, maybe your Uzumaki instincts will kick in and guide you, Shiroy explained. Naruto nodded his head in understanding, before he slowly trekked through the ruins. He felt Shiroy squeeze his hand in reassurance, and he gave her a grateful nod. They slowly moved through the ruins, bowing their head in respect when they saw the bony corpses of many Uzumaki kinsmen. It wasn't long before Naruto suddenly felt something calling out to him. He turned his head to the left only to see a temple with the Uzumaki spiral. Tilting his head in curiosity, he trekked towards the temple, with Shiroy and Jiraiya following. Inside his cage, Kyubi smirked. The blade was calling out to Naruto, it seemed. Entering the temple, Naruto couldn't help but be a bit awed at the sight. Unlike the other buildings they investigated, this seemed a bit more livelier in comparison. The curtains on the walls didn't seem to fade in color at all, and the Uzumaki symbol stood proudly on the curtains. And the shelves were stacked various books and scrolls. Jiraiya and Shiroy held odd expressions as well. There were so many books which meant so much knowledge as well. However, what really caught Naruto's attention was the altar which stood in the middle of the room. He made his way to the altar, and to his surprise he noticed some engravings on the altar. You who the blade calls out to, you are now the head of the Uzumaki clan. Take the blade of the eagle and blessed by the one with 9 tails, and show the world the Uzumaki will never die out. Naruto said, repeating the inscriptions on the altar. What does it mean by blade of the eagle? Shiroy wondered. And what did it mean by blessed by the one with 9 tails? Jiraiya suspiciously asked, already having an idea. Inside his cage, Kyubi snickered. He had forgotten that he blessed the blade with some of his power. Naruto gently touched the altar, before it suddenly rumbled and the cover opened up, and a sword in a black leather scabbard ascended from the inside of the altar. Naruto reached out to the blade and grasped it. The sword pulsed in Naruto's hand, seeming to be happy to be wielded by him. Shiroy and Jiraiya watched with their breaths in their throats, as Naruto slowly unsheathed the sword. The sword was forged from a smooth, silver metal. Its crossguard was shaped like an eagle's wings, with the pommel in the shape of an eagle's head. Along with this, the sword's hilt was wrapped in strong, dark brown leather for gripping. Altair's sword from Assassin's Creed. Altair, I haven't seen that sword in a long time, Kyuubi uttered as he stared through his container's eyes at the sword. Kyuubi, you know of this sword? Naruto asked in surprise. Kyuubi hummed and thought as he debated on whether or not he should tell his container a little of his history. In the end, he decided to indulge in Naruto's, "Of course I know of that sword." 100 years before the first clans were beginning to form, I met a man by the name of Uzumaki Erasure. Back then, we Bijou weren't considered tailed demons. We are actually considered as deities. And Uzumaki Erasure prayed daily at shrine made for me. I had considered him foolish. Yet he always came and prayed even if I was never a true deity. When the clans were forming, Erasure knew it would lead to war eventually, so in order to protect his family, he forged the sword Altair. Kyuubi explained. Of course, when Erasure finished building the sword, he came to the shrine and asked if I would bless it with my chakra. I set about a series of tests for him to see if he was worthy of receiving my chakra. To my surprise, he completed all of them. I blessed the blade with my chakra, and so began the legend of Uzumaki Erasure, the greatest of swordsmen in his time. Every swordsman knows of his legend, so it wouldn't surprise me if they knew it was the sword you held in your hand was. Kyuubi finished. What about the way it was forged? This blade feels stronger than anything I've ever before. And why does it seem so happy? Naruto questioned. The blade is forged from the strongest of all metal that has long since disappeared from this world. That sword is probably the only thing made of that metal. The metal's name is adamantium. It was an indestructible before it mysteriously disappeared from this world. Because it was made from the strongest of all metals, the blade would never dull for at least 2,000 years. And since I blessed the blade with my chakra, Kyuubi trailed off. The blade will never rust dull or succumb to the aging process of time. Naruto realized. Kyuubi nodded in a pleased manner. That's right, and as for why the blade seems happy, well, I may have given it a little sentience when I blessed it with my chakra. What do you mean? The blonde-haired Uzumaki asked. I mean that the sword, despite having a little sentience, won't have a true mind to be able to contact you. However, it will display some type of sentience now and then, such as whenever you're training with it. It will telepathically teach you how to wield by communicating with you through your instincts. Another example would be that it won't let anyone but you pick it up. And a final example would that if you try to seal it in a scroll, it will send a pulse wave of sadness. Just see what I mean, and tell if it would like to be sealed. Kyuubi first explained, then ordered at the end. Okay? Naruto thought, not really seeing what Kyuubi meant. So, Altair, would you like to be sealed in a scroll? Naruto asked, feeling stupid about asking a sort of question. Altair pulsed in sadness inside Naruto's hand. Naruto's eyes widened slightly. The sword. No, Altair was truly somewhat alive. It's okay, Altair. I won't seal you in a scroll, the blonde thought with a small smile. Altair pulsed in happiness at his new wielder's statement. Naruto gently placed Altair back in his sheath before he set him into his belt and left him hanging there by his side. Altair pulsed in contentment as he was by his new wielder's side. Kyuubi, thank you for explaining to me about Altair. If you didn't, I probably would have sealed him in a scroll. Naruto thought. Tay, don't misunderstand me, Naruto. I only assisted you because I was bored. And I was really getting tired of hearing the water running in piece of shit sewer you call a mind. Seriously? I've known rats with better minds than this. So does that say about you? Kyuubi grinned. Naruto's eyebrow twitched in irritation, and he sighed. Yep, nothing's changed with the Kyuubi. Hey, Earth to Naruto. You there? Jiraiya shouted as he flicked Naruto in the forehead. He immediately felt Shiroi's piercing glare, but he ignored it, though he did shiver a bit. You didn't have to flick my forehead, Ero-sensei. Naruto shouted as he held his forehead. I've been calling you for about 5 minutes, Gaki, and only just now you acknowledge me. Jiraiya shouted. Naruto gave Jiraiya an annoyed look before he quickly explained his conversation with the Kyuubi. The reaction varied. Jiraiya looked both shocked and amazed. To think that such a long time ago the Bijou were considered deities. It was truly something that no one in this current time knew of. And the sword, he had heard of the legendary blade Altair. However, to see the blade that surpasses the Kusanagi and said to be able to harm Bijou is truly amazing. And to think that the Kyuubi had a hand in creating the blade, truly fascinating. Shiroy, meanwhile, had an interested and happy look on her face. Interest because of the things that Sword must have seen over the many years. And happiness because the blade couldn't be used against Naruto. After all, if it truly is a somewhat sentient weapon, then that meant it wouldn't allow anyone but Naruto to wield it. The mere thought of some bastard using Altair against her blonde lover pissed her off, royally. So, what are we going to do now, Ero-sensei? Naruto asked as he patted Altair's pummel like a pet. Altair pulsed in irritation as his wielder's actions. Naruto mentally grinned at that. Well, stay here in Yuzu until it's time to summon Pa. It'll give us time to rest and whatnot. Jiraiya shrugged. Naruto nodded before he began to unsheath Altair. It'll give me time to train with Altair, Naruto said before he went off to find a perfect clearing. Shiroy, with nothing better to do, simply followed Naruto to watch him train. Jiraiya blinked once, twice, and a third time. Why does it feel like I was forgotten? He grumbled before he followed his student. The last few days had been quite interesting during their stay in Uzumaki. Jiraiya, being bored, what with no hot springs around to do some pier, research for his books, opted to just wander around the village. A mistake on his part, seeing as the places he entered were extremely booby-trapped. And by extremely, I mean the type of traps that will literally having you shipbricks. Jiraiya still couldn't believe he was nearly crushed by Stonehead carving of a bird. He immediately returned to their campsite after he was nearly robbed of his manhood because of the classic arrows shooting out of walls trap. Only problem was they aimed to close to his manhood. He decided to never, ever wander around the village again. Shiroy, after hearing what happened to Jiraiya, laughed hysterically before she calmed down and decided to stick near Naruto, since it seemed the village wasn't trying to kill him. Plus, it gave her an excuse to not leave her blonde lover's side with Naruto. He decided he was going to somewhat train with Altair without clones. He wanted to accomplish this self-given task on his own, without help from his clones. So he trained with the blade. However, Kyuubi was right, Altair was training him. Even though Altair couldn't speak, the blade had been teaching Naruto through Naruto's instincts. That surprised Naruto, but he was glad Altair was helping him. And after those several days, Naruto could safely say he was at least low-level Chunin in Kenjutsu. Also, Naruto treated the blade with great care, always cleaning it when it had even the slightest smudge of dirt on it after training. Altair pulsed in happiness at that. But finally the day has finally arrived. The day where Naruto would be judged to see if he was worthy to learn Senjutsu. Today where Fukasaku would be summoned. Are you ready, Naruto? Jiraiya asked as he gave his apprentice a blank stare. Naruto held a determined expression as he nodded his head. Shiroy held a slightly disheartened look. Not that Jiraiya could blame her. After all, today was the day where he would summon Fukasaku to judge Naruto worthy of being a Toad Sage. Shiroy kept her eyes on the floor. Truthfully, she didn't want Naruto to leave her. She wanted to be near him, to feel his love, to feel his warmth, to hear his voice, to keep his scent, to look into those beautiful blue eyes of his. She wanted Naruto with her, but she didn't want to seem selfish. She didn't want Naruto to lose out on becoming stronger just for her. Jiraiya inwardly sighed and thought. Now was the perfect time to not only have Fukasaku test Naruto. This was the perfect opportunity to ask Fukasaku to see if Shiroy could come to Mount Mayaboku. Naruto, having noticed Shiroy's disheartened form, looked at her in concern. Shiroy-chan, are you all right? Shiroy quickly looked up at Naruto and gave him a bright smile that Naruto could instantly tell was fake. I'm fine, Naruto-kun, she said, masking her depressed tone with a bright voice. Naruto looked like he didn't believe her and was going to question her again. But he couldn't get a word out as Jiraiya suddenly claimed it was time to summon the Fukasaku. With Naruto's confirmation that he was ready, Jiraiya quickly summoned the Elder Toad Fukasaku. A small puff of smoke signaled Fukasaku's arrival, and as the smoke cleared, Shiroy and Naruto were finally able to see the esteemed Elder Toad. Yare Jiraiya-chan, is this the young lad you told me about? Fukasaku asked as soon as he laid eyes upon Naruto's form. He had to admit, the blonde seemed impressive. He especially liked the robes he was wearing, and the resemblance to Minato was uncanny as well. You know, Naruto-chan, you look an awful lot like the Yondaime, Fukasaku stated, watching Naruto intently. Naruto blinked, before blushed in an embarrassed manner. Why, you really think so? He stuttered with an embarrassed grin. The Yondaime was always his idol. To hear that he resembled the Yondaime both pleased and embarrassed him somewhat. Fukasaku's eyes only slightly widened before he gave Jiraiya a pointed look. Naruto-chan, Shiroy-chan, why don't the two of you go outside and talk if you want? I want to speak with Jiraiya-chan for a few minutes. Fukasaku asked, but what about my judgment test? Naruto hesitantly questioned. Fukasaku gave Naruto a warm smile. They say that the eyes are a window to a person's soul, Naruto-chan. The second I looked in your eyes, I knew you were worthy. Now run along. I must ask Jiraiya something very important. Naruto nodded at Fukasaku before he turned to Shiroy, only to find her gone. He heard the door close, and he was instantly outside the ruins the temple they were in and stepped outside of the ruins of Uzumaki. Fukasaku, now sure that Naruto was gone, gave Jiraiya a stern look that demanded an explanation. Jiraiya-chan, why is it that Naruto-chan doesn't know that Minato-chan is his father? The look on his face wasn't someone who knew of his father. It was the look of someone who was admiring their hero. Fukasaku stated. Jiraiya hesitated slightly. He isn't ready yet, pa. Jiraiya uncertainly said. Fukasaku gave Jiraiya an unbelieving look. Isn't ready, Jiraiya-chan? He began in a perplexed manner. Jiraiya-chan, I saw the boy's eyes. He matured greatly in the months you had him. Not only has he gotten much calmer from what you've told me, he is also much more kind-hearted than anyone I've ever seen. I don't even think it's possible for Naruto-chan to hate someone completely. The real reason you're not telling him is because you're afraid he'll hate you. Am I right? Fukasaku finished. Jiraiya stayed silent, only further proving Fukasaku's point. The Elder Toad sighed. Jiraiya-chan, rather than thinking about the negatives, think about the positives. You could finally act like the godfather you were meant to be since the beginning, Fukasaku sagely said. Jiraiya was silent for a few moments before he spoke. Okay, pa, you made your point. Fukasaku gave a pleased smile, but I'll only tell him when he masters Senjutsu. Jiraiya finished. Fukasaku nodded in a pleased manner. That's acceptable, Jiraiya-chan, the Elder Toad said. Pa, there's another thing I want to ask of you, Jiraiya suddenly said after a few moments of silence. Fukasaku raised an eyebrow. And what would that be, Jiraiya-chan? He asked in a puzzled manner. Well, it's like this. Jiraiya began. Shiroy-chan, wait up! Naruto shouted as he tried to catch up to the silvery white-haired vampire. Shiroy slowly came to a stop, and she turned around and gave Naruto a bright but obviously fake smile. Naruto-kun, is something wrong? She asked, fake smile still in play. Naruto suddenly scowled as he saw the fake smile on her face. He took no notice of the surprise on her face at seeing his sudden scowl as he spoke. Shiroy-chan, stop faking that smile. Something is bothering you, and I want to know what it is, he seriously stated, as his piercing blue eyes bored into her pink ones. No matter what, she could never get enough of those beautiful blue orbs. The way they intently watched her, the way they resembled the ocean, the intensity that could be held in them, and the amount of love and care in them as he looked at her. She loved those eyes, and she loved him. More than anything. She couldn't lie to him. She just couldn't. It was too hard to lie to him. Your training for Senjutsu bothers me. she finally said. Naruto tilted his head in a confused manner, not knowing just how cute he looked at the moment. It took every ounce of willpower Shiroy had to not squeal and smother the blonde in her chest. "What do you mean exactly?" "Shiroy-chan," the blonde asked as he scratched his head. Shiroy sighed inwardly. Despite Naruto's outstanding progress, he was still a bit dense. That was something she had to rectify when he turned 14. The thought of what she would do to him when he finally turned 14 made her inwardly grin in anticipation. A feral and predatory gleam entered her eyes for a moment. It was there for only a moment, but then faded so quickly that Naruto thought he imagined it. "What I mean is that this training will separate us for an unknown amount of time, and I don't want to be separated from you, Naruto-kun," Shiroy explained with a downcast expression. It was selfish, she knew. But was it so wrong for her to want the blonde in his time all to herself? "Shiroy-chan, you're being a little bit of an idiot, don't you think?" Naruto said. Shiroy's head snapped up towards him, and she was prepared to demand what he meant when she saw the warm and loving smile he was giving her. She blushed as he smiled at her at that way. His smile as well. Oh, his brightening and wonderful smile warmed and melted her heart with love and affection for the blonde when he smiled at her that way. "Shiroy-chan, we'll ask if you're allowed to come with us to Mount Mayaboku, and if not, well, I will not accept Senjutsu training if you're not there," he finished, as he looked warmly at her. Altair pulsed in agreement at Naruto's side. Shiroy merely stared at Naruto in shock. He would give up learning something so valuable. For her? Her heart warmed even more at his words. She loved him so much right now. But she couldn't and wouldn't let him lose this training because of her own selfishness. "Naruto-kun, I can't let you give up something so important and powerful just for me," she said. "Don't, Shiroy-chan. Even if I don't learn Senjutsu, I still have the scrolls of Jutsu I found while in our stay in Yuzu. I'm especially interested in learning the water style." "Water Phoenix," the blonde said. During their stay in Yuzushigakure, Naruto found several scrolls of the Uzumaki clan. A few possessed knowledge of sealing, which Naruto took to like a fish to water, seeing as his kinsmen were sealing masters. So it's only natural that he as well become a prodigy at sealing. A few even had some jutsu. However, he couldn't use some of them, but he decided to keep them, after they were his family's. So it's only right that he take them to keep them safe. There were few wind-based jutsu that he found, but not that much, seeing as wind was a rare element even in Yuzu. However, there seemed to be dozens of water jutsu, so Naruto assumed that water users were everywhere in Yuzu. Apparently the water style, Water Phoenix, was a jutsu somewhat similar to the water style, Water Dragon. Only this one creates a phoenix made entirely of water. It was a signature and one of their most powerful jutsu the Uzumaki clan had. Naruto honestly could not wait to learn the technique. It would prove to be a truly valuable and useful jutsu. Getting back on track, Shiroy, however, still did not want Naruto to give up Senjutsu just for her, which was why she opened her mouth to argue with Naruto once more. "I don't care, Naruto-kun. I cannot, would not, and will not let you lose such an opportunity simply because of my own selfishness dash." She was interrupted, however, as Naruto, having enough of her arguing, decided to shut her up the only way he knew how, by softly pushing his lips against hers, capturing her a sweet and loving kiss. Shiroy's eyes widened for a moment before her eyes became half-lidded as she returned the kiss. Parting their kiss, Naruto gave Shiroy a bright smile that instantly seemed to make the sun shine brighter. "Shiroy-chan, either they let you come with us so I can use Senjutsu, or I will simply refuse to learn at all," he said. Altair once again pulsed in agreement. As long as his wielder was happy, it was happy. Inside his cage, Kyubi hummed, in a somewhat disinterested manner. After all, it wasn't his concern on whether or not they allowed Shiroy to go to Mount Mayaboku. However, though he would never say out aloud, he hated when his container was in some type of pain. It's why he gave his chakra to the blonde when his container fought that Uchiha. He had watched over Naruto since he was born. Dare he say it? He actually saw the boy as the type of son he never had. Not that he actually cared or anything. It was instinct. Yes, that was the word he was looking for. Yeah, instinct. He was the king of the bijou. And goddamn it, if his container wasn't strong, then he would be seen as weak. That's the only reason he cared. With that last thought, QB went deeper into his cage to rest, and maybe find some blackmail material of his kit, container, to use later. He grinned in anticipation at what he might find. "Are you sure about this, Naruto-kun?" Shiroy asked as she stared deeply into Naruto's eyes. Naruto merely smiled and quickly held Shiroy's small hand into his. "Yeah, nothing won't just be the same if you're not there with me every step of the way," he softly said. Shiroy blushed prettily as she smiled. "Then you better take responsibility for whatever happens, all right," she said as she gave him a soft peck on the lips. Naruto smiled. "Yes, Shiroy-sama," he said in a joking manner. Shiroy inwardly blushed even more. She idly wondered if she could get him to say that when she bed him. "Let's go, Shiroy-chan, we have to ask the Elder Toad if you can come," Naruto said, pulling on Shiroy's hand. Shiroy smiled before they began to move towards the ruined house, where Jiraiya and Fukasaku were speaking in. However, not even 5 steps away, a loud rumbling sound was heard. They both suddenly stopped, and Naruto looked down his stomach, only to find it never rumbled in the first place. Hesitantly, he turned his gaze to Shiroy, only to find her blushing cutely in embarrassment as she tried to keep her head held high in dignity. "Shiroy-chan, was that?" Naruto trailed off. "Nonsense. I am a lady, and it is not proper if a lady's stomach rumbled like the dash." She couldn't finish, however, as her stomach decided to make itself known by once again rumbling. Basically, it was saying, "Fuck you, I want some damn food." That's what her stomach would have said if it could talk. She held her head down in embarrassment, and she repeatedly cursed her stomach over and over again. Naruto chuckled in an amused manner before he craned his neck out. "Here you go, Shiroy-chan," he said, not at all bothered that he offered his neck to a vampire. Shiroy wasted no time in almost immediately latching onto his neck as she began drinking his blood with a content moan. And for Naruto, just like all the other times Shiroy drank his blood, only felt a dull pain before it faded. He absently stroked her silvery white hair and idly caught a whiff of her smell. He blushed when he felt her lick his neck in an effort to get more blood, it seemed. He smiled as he continued to stroke Shiroy's hair. She was his most precious person. He would love and protect her from anything. Not even the mighty QB himself could stop him from loving and protecting her. Inside his cage, QB scoffed in a somewhat arrogant manner. There was no way the brat could best him. He was the mightiest of the 9 bijou. His sheer greatness and power made others tremble and soil themselves in fear. He was the king of the 9 most deadliest beings in history. He was the almighty QB-sama. Having made his point to himself, he placed his head back on his paws and continued to watch through his kits. Containers. Eyes. It was good to be king. And that's the entire story, Pa. Jiraiya finished. He had just finished explaining the entire situation about Shiroy, her vampire nature. How he noticed her depressed state when she learned Naruto would be learning Senjutsu, and as such won't be able to be with each other for an unknown amount of time. The Elder Toad merely stayed silent, though at first he had been shocked by her being a vampire, but he got over it, and instead found himself interested in their relationship. The way Jiraiya made it sound, it seemed they were really close, up to the point where they would immediately relax in each other's presence. It made the small Elder Toad smile. He was happy for the blonde. After all, everyone knew that Jinchuriki needed more attention than any other human, what with the lives they lived and all. Though Jiraiya didn't exactly say, Fukasaku knew he wanted him to let Shiroy and Mount Mayaboku for Naruto's sake. Something that Fukasaku wholeheartedly agreed with. "I know what you want to ask Jiraiya-chan, and I'll allow it," the small toad said with a smile. Jiraiya beamed towards the Elder Toad, happy that his apprentice wouldn't be alone while he traveled the nations checking on his spy network, and possibly gather whatever data on Akatsuki. However, Fukasaku suddenly said with a mischievous gleam in his eyes. Jiraiya frowned lightly. What was the elder toad planning? It is Naruto-chan that must ask if Shiroi-chan can come. The toad finished. Jiraiya smirked in understanding before he opened his mouth to speak, but was interrupted when the door opened, and in entered a determined Naruto and a nervous Shiroi. Jiraiya and Fukasaku rose an eyebrow at the fire in Naruto's eyes, and he strolled determinedly towards them. They won't lie and say they weren't interested in what the blonde wanted, but they wouldn't speak as they suspected their patience would be rewarded, though Jiraiya already suspected on what this was about. Naruto stepped in front of the elder toad and stared blankly towards the small elder, before suddenly, much to the shock of everyone, even the Kyuubi, Naruto deeply bowed on his knees with his head touching the floor to the elder toad. Fukasaku, he suddenly shouted. Now, if everyone wasn't shocked now, then they were pretty much having a heart attack at the moment. Naruto never bowed to anyone. It just wasn't in his nature. Fukasaku was the first to come out of his shock, and he looked curiously to the blonde shinobi in gray robes with its hood down, exposing his head of golden blonde hair to the world. Yes? Naruto-chan, Fukasaku asked in a confused manner. Jiraiya also looked on in confusion. Just what the hell had gotten into his apprentice? Shiroi looked both shocked and surprised, though why she was still surprised and shocked made Jiraiya raise an eyebrow. Meanwhile, the Kyuubi looked as if someone had just slapped him with a giant fish. Naruto was bowing. What the fuck? Kyuubi uttered before he suddenly looked up, wondering if the world was suddenly coming to an end. Sighing in relief that the world wasn't ending, Kyuubi placed his paw on his furred chest. Nearly had a heart attack, he muttered before he focused his attention on the events happening through his container's eyes. Fukasaku-sama, I humbly request that Shiroi be allowed to come to Mount Mayaboku as a visitor until my senjutsu training is complete, Naruto said with his head still bowed. Shiroi's heart trembled with love and affection for the blonde. He was doing all of this for her. He truly was a gift from Kami, a gift that was meant to be protected and loved since the beginning. Many dark thoughts flew through her head as she thought of Konoha. Those worthless and pathetic humans dared to abuse him because of their own anger and misguided hatred. She hated them. She wanted them all to die, for all of them to suffer in the deepest pits of hell and forever burn for eternity. So many ways to kill everyone in that pathetic and hypocritical village. So many dark, sadistic, and horrifying torture methods she could perform. She knew of torture methods so cruel and so inhumane that it would make even Uchiha Madara shiver and whimper in fear. A growl of alarms escaped her throat as she thought of Konoha, but she held it in. She couldn't destroy Konoha for one simple reason. Naruto still wanted to protect it. Despite all the abuse and mistreatment the blonde received, he still wanted to protect the village. As such, she would remain neutral to the village. She wouldn't try to kill them. However, she never said anything about giving them her evil eye. She inwardly gave a wicked grin, and her eyes glowed a menacing pink for a single moment. Not that anyone noticed. Meanwhile, back in Konoha, dozens of villagers shivered for no apparent reason. Fukasaku hummed in thought as he stared down at the young blonde before him. He must admit, he certainly wasn't expecting the blonde to be so respectful when it came down to the girl beside him. However, just because he swallowed his pride didn't mean that he had the resolve to keep trying. With this thought, the elder toad decided to give the blonde a test of sorts. And tell me, Naruto-chan, what would happen if I refused to allow Shiroi-chan passage? Fukasaku seriously stated as he stared apathetically down at the blonde. Naruto slowly looked up to give the elder toad a determined and passionate look in his eyes. Then I will refuse to accept any senjutsu training of any kind, Naruto declared in a dead serious voice. There was only dead silence after that. Jiraiya stared blankly towards the blonde before he finally registered what he said, and his eyes widened to the size of dinner plates. Naruto, you can't be serious. You would abandon senjutsu, all just for her? Jiraiya thought as he glanced at Shiroi to see her with a nervous expression as she waited for Fukasaku's answer. Fukasaku gaped at Naruto for a moment before he gave a small smile. Yar Naruto-chan. That was a test, and you passed with flying colors. I'll admit I didn't expect you to deny the teachings of Senjutsu, Fukasaku said. So you mean? Both Naruto and Shiroy trailed off with hopeful expressions. Yes. Shiroy-chan can come to Mount Mayaboku as well, said the old toad. As soon as that sentence was uttered, bright smiles immediately erupted from Shiroy and Naruto's faces. Suddenly Shiroy lunged and she buried her face into Naruto's neck. Thank you, Aji-sama, Naruto gratefully said, using Fukasaku's new title. Jiraiya gave a happy grin at seeing his students so happy. Seeing Naruto so happy made his heart warm up at the sight. He felt a sense of pride and contentment at his godson's answer to Fukasaku's test, and contentment that he was so happy. Truly, Naruto was a gem that comes to this world once every 1,000 years. Now then, Naruto-chan, Shiroy-chan, I suggest getting all of your baggage packed. We're going to be staying in Mount Mayaboku for quite a while, the elder toad advised. Both Naruto and Shiroy nodded before they quickly moved to another room to pack their things. Once they were gone, Jiraiya spoke. So, what do you think of him, Pa? Fukasaku hummed for a moment before he smiled. That boy will be a legend, Jiraiya-chan, and his heart is the purest and most kindest of hearts I have ever seen in my life, he confidently declared. Yeah. Jiraiya began, Naruto is a great kid. He finished. A poof of smoke declared the arrival of Jiraiya, Naruto, Shiroy, and Fukasaku as they arrived in Mount Mayaboku. Wow! This place is awesome! Naruto shouted as he removed his hood. Shiroy looked around with childish wonder and amazement as he looked around Mount Mayaboku. This was the home of the toads? This place looked awesome! Fukasaku gave them toadish grin at the amazement on their faces. Jiraiya chuckled before he gave Fukasaku a nod. Fukasaku returned the nod before the perverted sage disappeared in a puff of smoke. Hey, where did Ero-sensei go? Naruto asked. You didn't think Jiraiya-chan would remain here, did you, Naruto-chan? Just because he wanted to see your training doesn't mean he can. He still has a spy network to think about after all, Fukasaku explained. Oh, right, Naruto muttered, a little disheartened that Jiraiya wouldn't be there, but understanding his situation. He felt a hand gently grasp his own, and he gave Shiroy a grateful smile. Aniki! A loud voice shouted. The trio turned their heads to the direction of the shout, only to see Gamabunta's son hopping towards them. Holy shit! You got huge Gamakichi! Naruto exclaimed with a bright smile on his face. Shiroy gave a strained smile at the sight of a giant toad hopping towards a human and calling him Aniki. It was fucking creepy, man. Aniki, how you been? Gamakichi asked as when he was in front of the blonde sage in training. Naruto gave a grin. I've been great, Gamakichi, he said before his eyes brightened. Gamakichi, I want you to meet my girlfriend Shiroy-chan, he said, introducing the two. Gamakichi stared at Shiroy for a moment before he held out a webbed hand. Nice to meet ya, he exclaimed with a smile. Shiroy gave a nervous laugh as she took Gamakichi's hand and shook it. Seriously, she was greeting an oversized toad. She only had one thought to sum this all up. What the fuck? She thought. This was going to be a long training session for Senjutsu, she decided. Feeling a presence behind, she turned around, only to come to face with another man-sized toad. She stared blankly at the toad, only for it to give her a somewhat dopey look. You have any snacks? The toad asked with the dopey expression still on his face. Shiroy blinked once, twice, thrice, and a fourth time, before she shook her head no. The toad, seeing her shake her head no, turned towards Naruto. Do you have any snacks? He asked. Naruto chuckled in amusement before he brought out a pouch. He opened the pouch, revealing dozens of sweets in it. You're lucky I was thinking of you when I brought this Gamatatsu. Naruto said, amusement deep in his voice. Gamatatsu gave a wide smile as he began to devour the sweets. Gamakichi shook his head exasperation and Niki. You shouldn't give him snacks seriously. You're only encouraging him. he said, though there was only amusement in his tone. Naruto chuckled. Relax, Kichi. It's not like the world's gonna end if I keep giving him treats. The blonde said. Shiroi giggled. For some reason she found highly amusing. These toads treated Naruto like they were family. As such, they were family to her. It was a simple concept to understand. She loved Naruto more than anything. So it would make sense that she would be kind to those that were kind to Naruto and whom Naruto considers family. Ma, get out here and greet Naruto_chan. Fukasaku suddenly shouted. Everyone became silent at Fukasaku's shout. Naruto tilted his head in confusion, while Shiroi simply rose an elegant eyebrow. Who is Ma? Dang it, Pa. You interrupted me in the middle of cooking. Another toad the same size as Fukasaku exclaimed as she came into view. Shout your trap Ma and say hi to Naruto-chan and his girlfriend. Fukasaku exclaimed. Shiroi's eyebrow twitched. Just why the fuck were they yelling when they were right next to each other? Really, Naruto-chan is finally here? Oh, let me see the young lad already, said Shima before he hopped on Naruto's shoulder blade. Shima stared at Naruto for several moments, making Naruto nervous. Well, it's nice to finally meet you, Naruto-chan. My name is Shima, but mostly everyone calls me Ma. So I expect the same from you, okay, Naruto-chan? She suddenly said after staring at him for an unknown amount of time. Shima then turned her head toward Shiroi, and she hopped on her shoulder. And you must be Shiroi-chan. It's nice to meet you. You're very beautiful, you know that, she said. Shiroi smiled at the toad on her shoulder. It's nice to meet you as well. Shima said, Ma, she said, but then corrected when she saw the warning look Shima was giving her. The little toad smiled and nodded her head approvingly. Ma, why don't you get back to cooking with Shiroi-chan accompanying you while I teach Naruto-chan the basics of senjutsu? Fukasaku stated. Oh no, our food is going to be burned, Shima exclaimed. Quickly, Shiroi-chan. You must escort me to the house quickly, she yelled, gently pulling Shiroi's hair in the direction of the house. Shiroi blinked once, twice, a third time, before she silently obeyed Shima's directions. Now that they are gone, Naruto-chan, we can get started on teaching you the basics, Fukasaku said. Hey, can I come to Fukasaku-sama? Gamakichi asked, sending a deadpan expression towards Gamatatsu, who was still devouring his sweets. Of course you can, Gamakichi-chan, Fukasaku said, casting Gamatatsu a deadpan expression as well. The trio quickly went in a different and much more quiet clearing, where they would begin Naruto's basic senjutsu training. All right, now I am about to explain the difference between ninja techniques and sage techniques. I know we never actually told you what exactly it all entailed, so I expect you to pay attention, okay, Naruto-chan, Fukasaku said as soon as Naruto sat in front of him. Naruto nodded silently, telling the old toad to continue. As you know, ninjutsu and the likes use the energy from within your own body. But senjutsu uses the energy surrounding you, Pa explained while flaring his arms wide. Explain, Naruto said with a very interested expression on his face. Ninja techniques use chakra born of spiritual energy and physical energy that mix together inside your body. But sage techniques also add the natural energy from nature to form a new, stronger chakra. Pa explained. Naruto nodded in understanding, so it was basically steroids for all of his techniques. That was so awesome. Now you can't feel natural energy yet, so it's impossible for you to use and see it, Fukasaku said. Naruto tilted his head slightly. So how exactly am I supposed to use it then? Naruto asked. Become one with nature, Pa simply said. And how on earth am I supposed to do that? Naruto asked with a tilt of his head. Thankfully, Gamakichi came to his aid. It was not something Naruto wished to hear, though. Easy. You have to die. Now, if Naruto were the same as he was before he received training from Jiraiya, he probably would have immediately sprang to his feet and overreact. However, now, he was, as he called himself, Badass Naruto. So he simply settled for a blank expression on his face, while he gave Gamakichi a blank stare, which served to unnerve said toad. "What?" Naruto said in a blank voice, void of any and all emotion. Inside his cage, QB slightly rose his eyebrow. This was new. "Gamakichi, that was totally unnecessary." The orange toad shrank slightly under the intense gaze of his elder, before breathing a sigh of relief when those golden eyes were once again trained upon Naruto. It wasn't like he was lying or anything. If his blonde buddy screwed things up, he died just as quickly as any other death blow. Natural chakra wasn't something you mess with willy-nilly. Don't worry, Naruto-chan. You won't really die. As long as you listen to what I say, I'll start from the beginning. One needs to be able to feel the energy and draw it in first before you can control where it goes through your body. So the easiest way to train is to not move. Naruto nodded. That was a far much more easier way of saying it. "Well, let's get started then, Pa," Naruto exclaimed with a grin. "Now hold on, Naruto-chan. I never explained what would happen should you fail to control nature chakra." Seeing Naruto stop, the elder toad continued. "It's all about balance, my boy. Spiritual, physical, and natural. Can't make sage chakra without them harmonizing equally. Too little, there's no sage energy. Too much, and you turn into a toad." At that, Fukasaku tilted his head downward and pointed a finger in Naruto's direction. "A little too much, and I can just knock it back out of ya. But absorb way too much. Well, I hope you can get used to the taste of bugs. That's what I was talking about when I said you'd die. Die as a human." Gamakichi explained. It literally would be the same as resigning himself to death if he overloaded with the power of nature itself. Naruto simply stared blankly at the two toads, making them feel somewhat nervous, before suddenly a grin erupted from his face. "Then I can't let nature chakra overwhelm Nan. No, I won't let overwhelm. I have to keep my promises. And I have to return to Konoha to defeat Akatsuki. I can't let something like this slow me down. And I have to master this for Shiroi-chan," he said with overwhelming confidence radiating from him. Both of the toad's eyes widened. This boy. No, this man had once again surprised them. He truly was an unpredictable shinobi. He will truly be something great, Pa thought. Looking into the blonde's eyes, he couldn't help but feel 50 years younger. "Very Naruto-chan, I won't go easy on you. Now take off your clothes," Fukasaku excited shouted, unaware of how wrong that sounded. Naruto blinked rapidly for several moments. What?" Naruto muttered, edging away from the small toad. Gamakichi face-palmed. There goes Naruto's awesome moment. Inside his cage, QB was howling with laughter. Seriously, that was the most priceless thing he saw in the last 100 years. Fukasaku sheepishly chuckled. "Sorry, Naruto-chan, let me explain. It's just easier to get rid of nature chakra, because direct skin contact works better," he explained. Naruto sighed in relief before he nodded. It was going to be a long couple months, that was for sure. 2 months had passed since then, and Naruto's sage training shocked everyone with the progress he made. With the help of 2 more clones, since that was the limit Pa set for him, Naruto had mastered Senjutsu in a whole month. That shocked Fukasaku and all the other toads. The mere fact that Naruto mastered such a difficult art in just a month made them want to faint and die from a heart attack. Shiroi, however, was happy with Naruto's progress and gave him kiss as a reward. Jiraiya wasn't meant to return until the 2 months were up. That left both Shiroi and Naruto to explore Mount Mayaboku. During their exploring, they found Gamabunta and several other massive toads. It made Shiroi's eyes widen when she first saw them. I mean, seriously, toads the size of mountains, what the FU, CK? One toad Naruto met was Gamahiro, a toad with remarkable swordsmanship. When they first met, Gamahiro immediately knew what the blade Naruto held was. He asked some questions about Altair, such as where he found and how did he get it. Of course, Naruto saw no problem with it and quickly explained the details. And to say Gamahiro was shocked would be an understatement. After getting over his shock, He and Naruto exchanged in casual conversation and became fast friends. He even offered to the blonde that if he needed specially made weapons to ask him, since he knew how to forge blades. Though reluctant, Naruto explained how kunai never felt right to him whenever he used them, and how most of the time he was tempted to just fight with his fist whenever he was forced to use a kunai. Gamma Hero hummed in thought for several moments before he said that maybe throwing knives might work better for him. Naruto tilted his head, but nodded and tried it out by throwing some knives made for throwing that Gamma Hero gave him. And to his and Gamma Hero's shock, Naruto hit a target center mass. Gamma Hero immediately claimed that he would start working on some specially designed throwing knives made just for him, despite Naruto protests. Several days later, Gamma Hero presented Naruto's new throwing knives. Both Naruto and Shiry were amazed and instantly fell in love with the knives. The knives were full size and designed for medium and long-range throwing. These knives have a sleek, tactical look and feel. Constructed of one solid piece of AUS 6 stainless steel and finished in black and satin, each knife has been balanced for spot-on throwing. The link to what the knives look like is in my profile. These knives were so perfect and deadly looking that it made even Kyuubi grin in anticipation at what they could do. Naruto thanked Gamma Hero repeatedly for the knives, but the giant toad waved him off. The time spent on Mount Mayaboku was both fun and amusing for the duo. However, they quickly swore to never eat Shima's cooking again. Seriously, bug soup? What the hell? Both Shiry and Naruto swore they saw the soup twitch multiple times, but they kept their mouths shut and forced themselves to eat the soup. They had thrown up quite a lot that night, but now finally, after 2 months, it was the moment they were all waiting for. Jiraiya's return to pick them up, and quite possibly Naruto's first mission since they began their training trip. Shiry grinned in anticipation. She quite honestly couldn't wait to get away from Shima's cooking. It was so horrible. It made her want to cuddle up in a corner and cry because of the terrible food. And Naruto was practically shaking with excitement. Finally, his first mission since he began his journey. A chance to prove himself and to finally test his limits. Altair pulsed in agreement by his side, while the Kyuubi was fairly grinning. Finally, his container could show the whole world what he was made of. A puff of smoke signaled Jiraiya's arrival. The smoke finally cleared, and when both Shiry and Naruto went to greet Jiraiya, they found him performing his introduction dance. I am the man whom other men in the elemental nations envy, and the man whom the woman lusts for. I am the great sage of Mount Mayaboku, the teacher of the Yondaime Hokage, and one of the most powerful men to ever live. I am the great Jiraiya-sama. Jiraiya exclaimed before he proudly puffed out his chest. Both Shiry and Naruto stared blankly at the perverted sage. Even Kyuubi and Altair had nothing to say about that. And Altair was a fucking sword. Pa-ma! And the few toads that were with simply stared blankly at the white-haired toad sage. It appeared that they would have to discipline Jiraiya about his so-called introduction again. Shiroi's eye twitched slightly. That dance and introduction is so redundant, she uttered, with the toads and Naruto nodding in agreement. Naruto remembered the first time he saw the perverted sage introduction. After he saw it, he wasn't impressed, and he thought the old pervert wasn't a ninja, and that he beat Ebisu as a total fluke. Honestly, it made him seem so stupid and incompetent. Naruto blinked. Since when did he know that word? He shrugged lightly. Oh well. It made him seem smarter anyway. Inside his cage, Kyuubi snorted. Yeah, right, Gaki. You have a long way to go before you can be considered smart. Kyuubi muttered. It's not that he didn't consider his container smart, it's just... Oh, who was he kidding? He thought his container was a dumbass. Kyuubi gave one last snicker at his container's expense before he laid his head down and went back to sleep. Hey, it was hard work being a giant demonic entity inside the blonde. Oh, who the fuck was he kidding? He was just lazy as hell. So, ladies, now that you know exactly who I am, what do you say we just get down in bed and dash? Jiraiya abruptly came to a halt when he opened his eyes and noted he was in the presence of Naruto and the others. He blinked once, twice, and a third time. This isn't the brothel I was in, he lamely explained. Everyone merely gave him deadpanned expressions. Anyways, Jiraiya-chan, Naruto-chan here did something truly amazing. Fukasaku began wanting to change the subject. Jiraiya rose an eyebrow. Oh, really? And what was that? Whatever Jiraiya was expecting to hear. Hearing that Naruto mastered Senjutsu in just a month, wasn't it? It nearly gave him a heart attack when Naruto entered Sage Mode as proof. It had taken him years to get the basics of Senjutsu down before he could even use it properly. And even then, he never truly mastered Sage Mode, seeing as he would gain Toadish features whenever he entered Sage Mode. The mere thought that Naruto mastered Sage Mode in just 1 month, and that he mastered to the point where only his eyes would change, filled him with great pride. You've done a great job, Naruto. I'm proud of you, Jiraiya said, getting over his shock. Thanks, Ero-sensei, said the blonde with an embarrassed grin. So, where are we off to now, Ero-Gigi? Shiroy asked. Just as Jiraiya was going to speak, Fukasaku immediately spoke, interrupting Jiraiya before he could get a word in. Actually, Shiroy-chan, I believe Jiraiya-chan has something more to say to Naruto-chan, the elder Toad said. As he gave Jiraiya an expectant look, Jiraiya stiffened for a moment before he sighed in acceptance. Naruto, again I haven't been honest with you. The perverted hermit began with a somber expression. Naruto tilted his head in confusion before he removed his hood from atop his head. Shiroy merely narrowed her eyes slightly. What is it this time, Ero-Gigi? She thought. What do you mean, Ero-sensei? Naruto asked in confusion. Would you say that? After I tell you about your father, Naruto, Jiraiya solemnly thought. What I mean, Naruto, is that I knew your father. Jiraiya began. Both Naruto and Shiroy stiffened. Naruto because Jiraiya knew of his father. But how was that possible? Someone as famous as Jiraiya couldn't know his father, right? And Shiroy stiffened because of a suspicion she had. When she was watching Naruto's memory, she idly noted the resemblance he and the Yondaime had. But she wrote off as a coincidence. However, now she wasn't so sure. She knew that if Naruto was in fact the Yondaime's son, then IWA would almost stop at nothing to kill him, since they would fear the return of another Yellow Flash. She inwardly scoffed, like she would let them come within a mile of him. Was my father Ero-sensei? Naruto quietly questioned, unknowingly breaking Shiroy from her thoughts. Your father was one of the most powerful shinobi in the world, and he was kinder than any other person in the world as well. I don't even think it was possible for him to truly hate someone. Jiraiya began, as his eyes glazed over in remembrance. Your father invented 2 of the most known jutsu in the world. Your father was feared by many and loved by many. But no one loved your father more than your mother. As you know, you're a member of the Uzumaki clan, and your mother was the second Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi, with Uzumaki Mito being the first and you the third, Jiraiya said. Naruto nodded. He knew full well of his predecessors for the Kyuubi. After all, he was bound to figure out sooner or later. I mean, he did have a giant 9-tailed demonic fox in him that had way too much time on his hands, not to mention with what he learned from the Uzumaki clan scrolls. Your father was also my student before you, Naruto. His name was Namikaze Minato, the Yondaime Hokage, Jiraiya stated with a blank expression, though if you looked hard enough you would find a little fear and hope in his eyes. All was silent as Naruto held his down, his bangs overshadowing his eyes. Everyone waited for Naruto's reaction with bated breaths. The only thing that could be heard was the chirping of birds, and even that was falling silent. The wind blew, slightly brushing against Naruto robes. Slowly Naruto spoke. Why, me? He simply asked. Shiroy was quick to hold his hand as a sign of comfort and assurance. She felt Naruto's hand immediately tighten around hers, and she smiled softly. Minato couldn't just trust anyone with the Kyuubi Naruto. I don't know much of what happened that night, but from what I understand, sealing the Kyuubi into you was the only option. could ask another parent to give up their child. If you yourself are not willing to do the same, Jiraiya explained, silence was the only thing that greeted his answer. He solemnly began to put his head down, before he noticed Naruto's head begin to lift. When Naruto lifted his head, everyone was able to see the tears that he was holding back his eyes. And to the shock of everyone, he smiled. I understand why he did Arrow-sensei. He began, and I know that I can't just keep brooding over this. My father sacrificed himself not only for the village, but for me as well. I know that he loved me. I can feel it for some strange reason. So I'll make sure to make my parents proud of what I'll become. Or my name isn't Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto. The blonde exclaimed, with his tears of both sadness and happiness flowing freely down his cheeks. Everyone looked at the blonde in amazement. He wasn't angry. He didn't hate his father. He understood his father's decision. However, looking into the blonde's smiling face, everyone knew that everything would be all right. Shiry tightened her grip on Naruto's hand, and she gave him a warm smile. This entire thing only made her love the blonde even more than she already did. She happily laid her head on his shoulder, smiling in contentment as he laid his head upon hers. Jiraiya gave a happy smile as he stared at his godson and most amazing student. Truly, the blonde was one of the most amazing human beings on the planet. The elder toads and their younger counterparts all smiled in contentment. The awkward and tense air had all but disappeared, leaving filled with love, happiness, and joy. Altair pulsed in happiness at his wielder's side, happy that his wielder was happy. Inside his cage, Kyubi, who had been abruptly awoken from his nap because of the tense atmosphere he had sensed, merely stared through his container's eyes for several moments. Rakuto Jiji, it looks like you may have been correct. This child could be the one of the prophecy. But no, it's still too soon to tell if he truly is the one you spoke of. Kyubi muttered before he put his head back down and slept once more. Jiraiya let everyone enjoy the joyous air for several minutes before he coughed into his fist. Both Naruto and Shiry immediately set their attention on him, though they did not separate from their embrace. The toads and the elders merely looked on in curiosity. Sorry to cut this short, but there's one thing I want to give you, Naruto, before you begin your first mission since we started this journey. Jiraiya began. Seeing that he had everyone's attention, he continued. Now here's the first thing I want to give you, Jiraiya said as he opened his scroll and channeled a small amount of chakra into it. A small puff of smoke later, some papers that appeared to be notes came into view. Jiraiya quickly scooped them up and handed them to the blonde Uzumaki. This, Naruto, is the notes your father made on his most devastating jutsu, the Hiraition. He explained. Everyone gazed upon the notes in awe. These papers contained the mechanics on how to use the Hiraition. It was your father's wish that you learn this jutsu when you were ready. He made so that only blood relatives could use this jutsu. Basically, the only person who could use the Hiraition is you, Naruto, the white-haired Sannin seriously stated. Naruto's eyes widened. He was the only one able to use the Hiraition, a jutsu sought after by countless individuals for either power or prestige, and he was the only one capable of effectively using it. This technique was the cause of the end of the Third Great War. This technique made Might Guy's speed look as if it were a slow-moving slug. This technique was created by his father. It made him grin in anticipation at what he would be able to do with a technique such as this. The possibilities were nearly endless. He smiled softly as he looked at his father's handwriting. It was so neat and well written, almost as if he wanted these notes to be made perfectly so that he wouldn't have to misinterpret the instructions on it. He gently folded the notes and placed them inside his pouch. Patting just for an extra measure, he felt Shiry shift her head, and he turned to see what she was doing, only for their eyes to meet. They stayed that way for several moments, before Shiry gave him a quick peck on his lips and slowly backed away with a slight smirk on her face. Naruto had a small blush on his face, as everyone cooed out in awe. Honestly, it still amazed him how she could be so forward in public, But that was one of the main things he loved about her. She was just so beautiful and wonderful. Her unique pink-slitted eyes enticed him in a never-ending void that he could get lost in forever. Her long, silvery white hair was smooth and felt as if they were made of silk. Her cute small nose made her expression seem adorable. Her teasing and an almost seductive smirks she threw his way were enough for his chest to warm up at a remarkable rate. Though she may be petite, it just seemed to bring out her beauty. She was hardly afraid of anything, and she had no problem with staking her claim on him whenever they were just passing by a town. He knew she had a far more darker and slightly more evil side, but he didn't care about that. He loved more than anything. His crush on Sakura was just that, a childish crush. He knew that his crush on Sakura was pointless. After all, the way she reacted when Sasuke was pulled out of his coma when Itachi used Tsukuyomi was proof of that pursuing a relationship with her would be pointless. So he gave up on pursuing a relationship with her after that. He only promised to bring Sasuke back 'cause he wanted her to be happy. It was strange. Here he thought that he would never truly know love, seeing as Konoha denied him that, and his crush constantly rejected him, only for him to meet Shiry, the girl who changed him for the better, a girl he loved more than anything. He would do anything for her. As long as she was happy, he was happy. He had already decided several months ago that his heart and soul belonged to her now. She was his light in this world now. He still wanted to protect the people close to him, don't get him wrong. But the people close to him could only fill the void in his heart for so long. He knew that more than likely, when the knowledge of QB came out, his friends would either ignore him or abandon him. He knew it would more than likely happen. After all, even though he defended the village from the Chibi, there was still some villagers that despised him. Most just began to become neutral towards him, with a rare few actually being friendlier towards him. He knew it would take a while for the entire village to accept him as a whole, but he was patient. After all, any normal child would have broke under the treatment he received. But patience and the willingness to try and give others a second chance were strongly embedded in his being. After all, how can the world know true peace if humans weren't willing to give others a second chance? The question wasn't if peace was possible. The real question was, were people willing to try? All right, Gaki, one last thing to give you before I give you the first mission you had in months. Jiraiya said, breaking Naruto from his thoughts. Naruto rose an eyebrow and gave the perverted hermit a questioning look. It's time. I give you your inheritance money, the perverted sage explained. Naruto and Shiry blinked before they separated, though they still held hands, and they stared curiously at the white-haired pervert. What? Inheritance money? The blonde asked. Let's see. The last time I checked your account for you, the sum of money your parents left was about 10.1 billion Rio, and it steadily increased over the years to about 15.3 billion. Jiraiya shrugged in an uncaring manner. After all, he had nearly 15 years to get over the shock of the amount Naruto had. Now it was time to see everyone else's reaction. The reactions were as he expected. The toads all held blank expressions before they gradually turned into shock and disbelief, their jaws hanging loosely and so wide open that flies would have no trouble building a home in them. Naruto had frozen over in shock. His eyes widened to the size of dinner plates. Slowly he brought his hand forward and he slapped his face, leaving a marked imprint on his face. 15.3 billion? He muttered. Altair. Well, Altair just pulsed in confusion on why his wielder was so shocked. QB, however, currently had his jaw hanging from his mouth, as his eyes were also widened to the size of dinner plates. He only had one thought to sum this all up. The Gaki is fucking rich, the fox uttered, as he slowly regained his composure. Shiry merely had a blankly expression on her face, before she slowly began blinking. She only had one thought at the moment. Shopping spree, she excitedly thought. Meanwhile, Jiraiya, Naruto, and QB all felt a cold shiver run through their spines, before they dismissed as nothing. However, Jiraiya got an image of Minato, giving him a terrified look, And oh, you old fool. Take my son and run away before it's too late. The fantasy Minato frantically roared before he faded away. Jiraiya blinked owlishly before he idly wondered if he was going senile. I'm rich, Naruto uttered, before a wide smile spread across his face. I'm freaking rich, the blonde yelled as he pumped his fist in the air. Everyone watched with a smile on their face as they witnessed Naruto's reaction. Jiraiya gave a brutish grin as he stared at his apprentice. Come to think of it, hasn't it already been a year and a half since he took the young blonde on this journey? That meant Jiraiya grinned wider. Tomorrow was the 10th of October. That meant Naruto's birthday was tomorrow. Meh. He figured this was a good birthday gift for him. After all, it's not every day you find out about your family account that has over 15.3 billion Ryo in it. All right, Gaki, enough celebrating. It's time I give you your first mission since your journey. Jiraiya began a light grin crossing his features as Naruto suddenly stopped and stared at him in anticipation, along with Shiry, who was giving Jiraiya a curious stare, and the toads who leaned forward wanting to know what their summoner's mission is. It's simple low-level B rank. Jiraiya began with the possibility of it being a high-level A rank. He quickly finished, seeing the disappointed expression on his student's face. Naruto perked up at that, while Shiry hummed and thought at what the mission could possibly entail. The toads merely sighed in slight disappointment, seeing as their summoner would only need them if he was fighting an S-rank shinobi. With nothing else to do, they quietly left, leaving only Fukasaku and Shima with the trio of travelers. What does the mission entail? Arrow Gigi? Shiry asked, giving the Sannin a stare that said he wasn't taking no for an answer. Just a small bandit camp that's been causing some trouble for a settlement near Tanzuku. However, the reason why it could possibly be considered a high-level A rank is because it's been said a shinobi has been seen among them. The white-haired pervert seriously stated. Shiroi's eyes slightly widened before she glanced at her blonde boyfriend. She knew he could come back from the mission without a scratch, but that didn't stop her from worrying for his safety. Naruto-chan, even if this is merely a low-level B rank, please remember to be wary of anything that could and would happen. Fukasaku sagely said. I understand, Pa. Naruto answered with a grin. Goodbye, Ma. I'll be sure to bring you back some food recipes next time, the blonde said to the female toad. It truly was an interesting and fascinating experience staying you, Ma. And Pa, Shiry said with a beaming smile towards the little toads. Fukasaku and Shima smiled to both Naruto and Shiry before they both looked blankly towards Jiraiya. Jiraiya-chan, if I hear you corrupted these two wonderful children, I will hunt you down and cut off the thing that makes you a man. Understood, Shima said in a blank tone. Jiraiya, pale as a ghost, fearfully nodded. Good luck on your mission, Naruto-chan. And Jiraiya, take good care of these young ones, the male toad stated. Jiraiya merely gave the two toads a grin before the trio disappeared in a poof of smoke. It had been a day since they returned from Mount Mayaboku, and since then Jiraiya had thought it best that Naruto do this entire mission on his own. At first there were protests, mostly from Shiroi's side, but he managed to convince them, though Shiry needed most of the convincing. And now both Jiraiya and Shiry were watching as Naruto entered the settlement where the bandits had been said to have been harassing. So, now we will finally see if Naruto's training has paid off, Jiraiya stated. Shiry merely gave Jiraiya a glance before she huffed at him, still angry about not being able to assist Naruto in his mission. You know, you could prepare yourself for tonight, and I'll tell you how Naruto did tomorrow, the perverted sage said, a slight leer in his voice. Shiry raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Jiraiya grinned. Tonight is Naruto's 14th birthday. He trailed off, a knowing expression on his face. Slowly Shiry turned her head towards the white-haired perverted sage. What exactly is the date? She asked with an undertone of excitement in her voice. October 10th, he merely answered. Shiry gave a feral and predatory grin before she stalked towards the hotel the trio were currently taking residence in. Don't interrupt me and Naruto-kun tonight, okay, Erojiji. Otherwise, I'll kill you, the silvery white-haired vampire sweetly said. Oh, don't worry. There's some hot springs in this town that I wanted to check out anyway. He leered, though he never said anything about not adding Shiroy and Naruto's relationship as an inspiration for his next book. He inwardly gave a perverted laugh. Oh, he could just imagine how his fans would react. As Naruto sat down in a stool near at the bar, he had a sudden urge to beat Jiraiya into a bloody pulp, but ignored in favor of obtaining information. It had been exactly several hours since he entered the town, and the first thing he did was find a local tavern and enter the sake-selling bar. Jiraiya had often told of how taverns could and always will have information worth obtaining. During his walk through town, he noted how everyone seemed a bit tensed and looked upon him with wary eyes. It didn't bother him per se. He just didn't like to be looked at in the middle of the street, so he quietly slipped into the crow and blended in. He was pleased to note how everyone immediately lost sight of him and continued on with their business. After several hours of wondering, he found a tavern and quickly entered it. Once he had entered it, he immediately noticed two suspicious speaking in the background, and two townsmen conversing hurriedly in front of the bar stand. He decided he would listen in on the townsmen conversation, first seeing as they were closer. Then after he heard enough, he would listen in on the two suspicious others' conversation. So he quietly sat down on a stool close to the two townsmen, but not too close, and pretended to browse through the various drinks that the bar had. His ear perked up, however, as he listened in on their conversation. I can't believe those damn bandits are harassing the hard-working people of this town, said the first male, the one on the left. I know what you mean, man. It's bad enough that the crops aren't growing so well this year. Now we got fucking bandits stealing what little money we have. Fan-fucking-tastic. The other said, a slight slur in his voice, evidence of the effect of alcohol on him. Tay, why do these stupid bandits have to ruin others' lives? Huh, it's so simple to just get a job and live an honest life. But no, those bandits just have to go the easy way, don't they? It's pathetic if you ask me, said the first one, taking a swig of his sake. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I heard those two people in the back are a part of that little bandit group that got Naruto's attention. Oh, really? Well, maybe we should tell them to get the fuck out of our town. No, we can't do that. And why the hell not? Didn't you hear the rumors? They say a shinobi is a part of their group. Naruto quietly stood, having heard enough, and having heard what he wanted to hear. He discreetly and silently moved towards the two in the back. Once he reached a close enough distance, one of them glanced in his direction. Calmly and silently Naruto moved towards two gentlemen whose back were against a wall with cups in their hands. He quietly leaned on the wall in the same position, only he crossed his arms. Fortunately, he was close enough to listen in on their conversation, as they whispered among themselves. Hey, when do you bosses gonna let us kidnap some of the women of this town? One leered. Naruto felt a surge of disgust flow through him. He barely resisted the urge to growl. Altair pulsed in anger and bloodthirst. I don't know when boss is gonna let us have some fun, but all I know is I cannot wait. The other licked his lips in anticipation. Another surge of disgust went through Naruto's being at hearing the two men's conversation, but he forced himself to be calm. He would deal with them later, when the time presented itself. So, what time did boss said to return to camp? The bandit slurred. Around sunset. Why? The other bandit merely pointed his finger out the window. 'Cause the sun is beginning to set, though not by much. I'd say the time is about 5 o'clock. Yeah, good point. All right, we'll finish our drinks and then return to Camp K. I hear that. Naruto stoically waited for the two individuals to finish their drinks, idly listening in on more of their conversation. And the more he heard, the more disgusted he became. They were actually talking about raping the woman of the settlement. It disgusted him beyond comprehension. They earned his attention, however, when they began speaking of their boss. Apparently their boss was an A-rank missing nin form Konoha that joined Amigakure. He racked his memory for anyone he knew of that betrayed the Leaf and joined AIM. Nothing came to mind. He was brought out of his thoughts when he noticed the two bandits stumbling out of the tavern. He waited until they left before he began leaving. After leaving the tavern, he looked around the streets before he caught sight of his two targets stumbling away from the small town. He slowly followed them, discreetly stopping and finding a hiding spot whenever one stopped and looked in his direction. Once they would begin moving again, he would immediately exit his hiding spot and slowly blend in with the crow all while they remained oblivious to his discreet stalking them. Soon they began to exit the town, and Naruto immediately took to the trees, trailing his targets from a distance. Every now and then one would stop and look behind them, before they would simply scratch their heads with a confused expression on their faces. Then they would shrug and continue on like nothing happened. This pattern continued for several minutes before they heard a rustling in a bush. One immediately drew the sheathed blade at his side and stabbed into the bush. The only thing that came out was a small brown rabbit, and it looked fearfully at the two men in front of it. The other laughed at his friend for being startled by a little rabbit. The other, angry at being laughed at, took his anger out on the rabbit and promptly stabbed the bunny in the head repeatedly. After the sixth time, he gave a satisfied smirk and resumed their walk back towards their camp. It was several minutes later did Naruto see their camp coming in sight range. Naruto nodded to himself, and he silently got closer to the two bandits via treetops. He silently took out two of his throwing knives from his pouch, and with incredible speed threw them with great precision. The knives hit their targets right in their throats. They gurgled for several seconds before they went limp. The blonde silently created two clones to dispose of the bodies, while he made several other clones to scout out the camp. He stoically and silently stayed in a tree only several meters away from the camp. He need not worry if they spotted him, with his gray-colored robes and his hood obscuring his face and golden blonde hair from view. He almost like a shadow at night or sunset. After several minutes, the blonde realized that it might take longer for the clones to scout out the camp. So he jumped onto a tree branch and laid himself against the bark of the tree, his right leg dangling off the branch as he went to take a short nap. He jerked awake several minutes later as his clones dispelled themselves. He silently hummed in thought. It seemed this bandit camp was not as large as it truly seemed. There were a total of 20 bandits, counting the two he killed. Apparently they were getting to rest up for the night, and they would raid the settlement tomorrow. He wouldn't let that happen, and it seemed his clones had taken it upon themselves to plan exploding tags around the camp, all of them placed in positions that it would immediately take out most of them. As for the supposed shinobi in charge of these bandits, well, it seemed he was resting in his own tent, and he specifically told his men that he was not to be disturbed. Naruto's face immediately switched into an impassive expression. Slowly he brought his hands forward. He made a single hand sign and silently flared his chakras slightly as to not alert the shinobi in the camp. Several moments later the exploding tags detonated, and immediately the screams of the bandits sounded out as some were being killed for being too close to the explosion or losing a limb or two. Naruto instantly created several shadow clones to deal with any survivors. While he himself merely jumped into the center of the mayhem, he slowly moved towards a tent in which the shinobi was residing in. Every now and then a bandit would attempt to stab him, but they were quickly killed by a clone. After that, the clone would jump back into the fray and finish with dealing with the surviving bandits. Just as he reached the tent in which the shinobi resided in, it opened and the shinobi he was targeting slowly walked out. Naruto's eyes hardened as he caught sight of the former Konoha shinobi. Rokusho Aoi, former Konoha shinobi, wanted for stealing the Nidaime Hokage's Raijin. Naruto coldly spoke. Aoi rose an eyebrow before he looked around the battlefield, and he bore witness to Naruto's last clone finishing off the last of his men. Well, what do we have here? A little punk thinking he can beat me? What village do you belong to? He asked before he spotted the Konoha insignias on the blonde's robes. Wait, don't answer that. It's obvious you're a Konoha nin. He smirked in a somewhat arrogant manner. Well, what are you going to do now, Gaki? Are you going to run away now that you're dealing with an A-rank shinobi? He confidently said, almost as if he was expecting Naruto to do exactly that. Unfortunately for Aoi, he was dealing with Uzumaki Namake's Naruto. No, I'm here to kill you and retrieve the Nidame's famed Rajin, the blonde coldly and coolly said, as he slowly drew Altair from its sheath. Altair pulsed in anticipation, excited that it would be fighting with its wielder in a true fight. Aoi sneered as he stared into Naruto's confident eyes. You think you can beat me? Gaki! I don't think so. I won't even have to use Anjutsu of any type to beat you, he arrogantly declared before he recklessly charged at the blonde. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the Jonin's arrogance. Teach that pathetic and worthless human what it seems to cross U.S. Naruto. The QB snarled out as he sneered at Aoi. Altair seemed to agree with QB as it pulsed in anger, and a faint red glow emanated from the blade. I understand, Naruto thought as he got into his Kenjutsu stance. He held Altair in front of him, with tip of the sword hovering just above the ground. His legs were slightly spread apart, not too far, but not too close either, and his left hand was lazily behind his back. To most people the stance might be lazy or somewhat arrogant. However, a true Kenjutsu master would see. The way he positioned his sword was so that he could deflect, block, and counter attacks coming from the left and right, while he could also do it from the front as well. Yet it also allowed him to attack at all of those sides as well. And the way he positioned his left arm made it so he could be able to react almost instantly to any and all attacks from behind. And finally, the way he positioned his legs made it so he would be able to move quickly and efficiently. The stance was perfect for both attack and defense, while at the same time making others believe he was arrogant and overconfident. Unfortunately for Aoi, he was not a Kenjutsu expert, so it was completely understandable that he would be angry and enraged with Naruto's seemingly arrogant and lazy stance. He immediately whipped out a hilt of a sword from his shirt, and he channeled his chakra into it. Instantly, the Tobirama's legendary Rajin sprang to life. The Konoha trader charged at the blonde, who by now had already slightly raised his sword to deflect the Rajin. That pathetic sword won't stop the Rajin. Fool! Aoi arrogantly roared, as the two legendary blades clashed. Now Aoi was expecting Altair to be sliced through. However, he didn't expect Altair to successfully deflect the Rajin. Aoi's eyes widened before he angrily glared at the blonde. That it was a fluke. He yelled before he attacked the blonde again. The following Kenjutsu battle could hardly be classified as such. For every strike and feint he performed, the blonde seemed to be at least several steps ahead of him. Every strike was either blocked, deflected, and countered with. Nothing seemed to work against the blonde. His defense was just as strong. The counters, deflects, and blocks were executed perfectly, and with such grace as well. Aoi roared in anger as he performed a horizontal strike against the blonde. Again the blonde gracefully and perfectly deflected his strike, directing his arm into the ground instead. Aoi grit his teeth before he spun and attempted to feint a vertical strike. But again it seemed like the blonde was expecting that, as he only tilted his sword to the left and once again blocked Aoi's diagonal strike. His face impassive the entire time. Aoi felt his anger increase before he began to wildly perform a series of stabbing attempts to stab the blonde. Naruto merely tilted his head every time he aimed for his head, and he used Altair to deflect most of the strikes on his body. Why don't you die? Aoi roared in anger. This brat was mocking, taunting him. He could feel it. Who did the blonde think he was? He was Aoi Rokusho, A-rank criminal in Konoha and Jonin in Amigakure. Who did this brat think he was? He was a nobody, a worthless brat with no talent. So, why couldn't he hit him? Hold still. Aoi screamed again, as he swung the Rajin with more force, aiming towards the blonde's head. Naruto, having enough of Aoi's anger-induced strikes blocked, and countered by moving Altair to cut Aoi's hand, he succeeded, and Aoi winced. Using that chance, The blonde spun around and gave Aoi several quick strikes to his upper body and legs. And finally, he ended his attacks with a stab into Aoi's left hand. Ah! Aoi roared in pain as he attempted to hit the blonde with another horizontal strike. Naruto merely removed Altair from Aoi's injured hand and gracefully slid back, avoiding the attempt to cut off his head. Aoi cradled his injured hand, and he glared maliciously at the blonde. Your stance is sloppy. Your attacks are unrefined. You'll waste your movements by moving around so much when you could just be patiently waiting for me to strike. And above all else, you're impatient. The blonde lectured in an emotionless voice, though there was a hint of disappointment in it. Aoi glared at the blonde as he rose to his feet. Don't lecture me, you pathetic wannabe. You can't beat me. The Rajin will taste your blood, fool. Aoi roared as he jumped in the air and descended upon the blonde, using his uninjured hand to hold Tobirama's Rajin. Naruto slightly shook his head in disappointment. This man wasn't a swordsman. No, he was just a thug fighting with a legendary weapon like it was toy. It was time to end this once and for all. This fake swordsman didn't deserve to wield the Rajin. Altair, sensing that Naruto wanted to end the battle once and for all, glowed a dark red for a moment before it dulled, though there was only a slight red glow to it. Naruto swung Altair to meet with the Rajin, Aoi still believing that Altair clashing with Altair was just a fluke, swung forward as well. Both blades met in a furious clash, before a slight cracking sound was heard. Aoi smirked, believing his opponent's blade was breaking. However, to his shock and horror, the Rajin's blade suddenly snapped in two, and the hilt was reduced into dust. He stared disbelievingly at the ashes of the Rajin in his hand. What? He uttered, stilling, gazing upon the ashes in his hand. How is this possible? He raged, as he glared at the blonde in contempt. Naruto merely gave him an impassive stare as he sheathed Altair in his sheath. He patted the sword on the eagle's head for such a good job. Altair pulsed in contentment. Do you realize what you've done? Aoi roared, before pulling out an umbrella. I destroyed the Rajin, a blade which you stole from Konoha and stole from the Senju clan. I'm certain that should the Nidaime Hokage was here, he would fully agree with my course of action. Naruto coldly spoke. I'll kill you, Aoi yelled, before he threw the umbrella in the air and performed several hand signs. Ninja art Senbon shower. The missing Nin roared before over dozens of Senbons began to shower themselves in Naruto's location. The hooded Bonode merely narrowed his eyes before the wind around him picked up. The Senbons began to wildly plant themselves on the blonde's location, each time more and more Senbon landing in the blonde's exact spot. Aoi laughed insanely as he watched his opponent die by his signature technique. That's right, die, you piece of shit, he gleefully exclaimed. The Senbon stopped raining down on the blonde, and the dust that kicked up slowly began to fade away faster than normal. Aoi never paid any attention to that, however, as he grinned. Heh, that'll teach you to never fuck with me, huh? Key. His eyes widened to the size of dinner plates, however, as he saw Naruto, standing in the same spot completely unharmed. All of the Senbon which had been launched were all scattered across the area around the blonde. How? Aoi trailed off, beginning to lose his voice. I got the idea after reading about the Yondaime Reikich's lightning armor. Naruto began as the wind around him picked up once more. I created this little technique as an inspiration of the Reikich's lightning armor. As you know, the Reikich's lightning armor allows him to have a perfect defense and a drastic increase in speed. The blonder opened his eyes for this part, so I figured, why not create a technique similar, yet entirely different from the lightning armor? Why not create a type of armor, just like the lightning armor, only instead of blocking all types of attacks? Why not make so that you could control the wind around you, to slow down projectiles and all attacks? Once again, the wind around the blonde made itself known. I call this little technique Wind Field. With the wind field, I can control all the wind in an area of my choosing. Air pressure, oxygen, wind strength. I control all that and more in this area. The blonde finished explaining with a smirk. I developed this little technique when no one was watching me, and when I was all alone when I was training, and then, oh, that's impossible. I refuse to believe someone like you can beat me, Aoi roared, before he blurred through multiple hand signs. Fire style, grand fireball. The missing nin exclaimed, placing every ounce of chakra into the technique. A massively large fireball began to move towards the blonde's location. Naruto took a deep breath before he cleared his mind like how Pa instructed him on how to do. His eyes snapped open not a second later, before he blurred through hand signs at ANBU level speeds. Water style, water phoenix. The blonde roared, using his clan's most prized jutsu for the first time. To Aoi's utter shock and amazement, water from the atmosphere, began to converge around the blonde before it took shape into a massive phoenix, the size of Kyuubi, made entirely of water, emerged from it. The water phoenix gave a mighty screech before it slammed itself into the fireball, not only causing the fireball to extinguish, but for a slight mist to settle in as well. How that level of water manipulation is said to only be a level on who Senju Tobarama achieved. Aoi yelled out in tired rage. During my time in Mount Mayaboku, Pa made sure that my elemental manipulation would be better than anyone else's. The blonde began. He had me create over thousands of shadows after my senjutsu training, and got them to work on my water manipulation, since my wind manipulation was already at an acceptable level. He wanted to make sure I was ready for the world. He bent to walk towards Aoi, who had long since fallen over in exhaustion. He wanted my water manipulation to be on Tobarama's level, and I didn't want to displease him, so I complied. The blonde explained as he knelt beside Aoi, and placed high hand to his throat. You will die now, Naruto tonelessly said. What are you going to do? Choke me to the dash. The missing nin couldn't continue speaking, however, as he felt a sharp pain in his neck, almost like something had piercing it. He saw the blonde withdraw his hand, and to his shock and amazement, he saw the foot-long blade extended from the hooded blonde's bracer before it retracted. Why did you betray Konoha? Naruto asked, curiosity seeping into his voice. Aoi, feeling his life begin to fade, saw no harm in revealing the blonde a bit of his character. Power, he answered. Power? Naruto asked, his eyes narrowing a bit. Yes, I left the village for power. Power is all that matters in this cursed shinobi world. Those with power thrive, while those with power die and are forgotten and abandoned. If you have power, then you ultimately control all aspects of everyday life for people. Ideals, principles, dreams, they are all useless without power. With power, you can do anything you want. He explained, you would abandon all of your principles for power. Naruto growled out. Aoi chuckled. Principle? His chuckles turned into coughs. What is principle, huh? Can it get a roof over your head? Can make your men all fall in line? Can it bring you the pleasures of the world? The missing nin resorted. Naruto merely looked away, as that was a question he couldn't answer. Aoi, seeing this, continued, the fact of the matter is, boy, is that power is the only thing that matters in this world. Friends, love, and even family are all useless. Power is the only thing that matters, the Konoha trader bitterly said. Naruto could only look at Aoi in a disappointing stare. Don't look at me like boy. We're different, me and you. The difference is that I have no problem sitting on a throne with a bottle of sake in one hand and the company of a woman in the other. Your hands will always be empty because of your foolish principles, Aoi slowly said before the life faded from his eyes. Naruto slowly brought his hand forwards and placed it on Aoi's head. Your words were bitter and may have held some truth to them. However, does not make them right. Yasuraka and I Nemirinmi, may you rest in peace, Naruto said as he shut Aoi's now lifeless eyes. You would show him respect even in death, Kyuubi asked as he awaited the blonde's response. The dead must be respected, Kyuubi. No matter who they are, The blonde thought back as he stood. QB snorted but accepted his answer. Naruto turned his head when he felt a hand on his shoulder, only to meet with Jiraiya's soft and assuring face. "I saw and heard everything, Naruto, and I'm proud of you," Jiraiya said with a warm smile. "Now get back to the hotel. Shiroy is waiting for you over there. I'll deal with this mess," the sage said, a gleam entering his eyes for a moment. Not that Naruto noticed, however. Naruto smiled back at his teacher before he nodded, and he silently began his trek to the hotel, never seeing the shit-eating grin on Jiraiya's face. "My student will finally become a man," Jiraiya blissfully thought with a perverted expression on his face. As Naruto entered his hotel room, he immediately felt like he was being stalked. It also didn't help that he heard what appeared to be small footsteps every now and then, but he merely assumed it was rats or something. So ignoring the feeling of impending doom, he got to work on getting undressed. He first removed all his pouches, belt, and scarf. Once that was done, he removed Altair from his waist and placed the sentient blade on wall. Then he removed his robes and by proxy his hood. He removed his hair from its spiked ponytail, letting his hair flow just past his shoulders in a spiked mess. He removed the dark orange mesh shirt he wore underneath his robes, revealing his muscled chest. He immediately felt like he was looked at like a piece of meat, but once again ignored the feeling. Next, he removed his black leather boots. He unstrapped the leather strappings on the boots. After that, it was a simple task of tugging them off. Then he removed his dark orange socks, and finally he removed his black pants, leaving him only in his ramen-themed boxers. Satisfied, he began moving towards the window to shut the curtains. Before he felt himself be yanked off the ground and thrown across the room, where he landed on his bed. He tried to stand up and face his attacker, only to have his arms pinned down, and for something to sit on him. He struggled for several moments, before a giggle reached his ears. He stopped. He knew that giggle. The moonlight shone through the window, revealing Shiroy clad only in a pair of panties and bra, straddling our blonde hero. A grin was spread across her face as he stared down on the blonde, and she hungrily licked her lips. "Shiroy-chan W, what are you doing?" Naruto squeaked out. "Ah, don't fret, Naruto-kun. Let Shiroy-chan take good care of you tonight," the silvery white-haired girl cooed, before she brought her lips to meet the blonde's, her tongue already dashing out into his mouth. Naruto stiffened in shock once again, before he slowly began to kiss back, his own tongue dashing out to meet hers in a battle for dominance. Shiroy, upset that she was losing the battle she had started minutes ago, slightly increased the force of her kiss, not wanting to lose. Naruto, being stubborn, fought back with his own tongue, and a battle of the tongues ensured with no winner being anywhere in sight. The slits in Shiroy's eyes began getting thinner and much more feral. Naruto felt her fangs getting longer, and he experimentally licked them. The sharpness of her fangs made his tongue bleed slightly as he licked the point of them. However, blood didn't seem to be of any concern to Shiroy, because instead of her tongue trying to find a way into his mouth, he found her eagerly licking his tongue, happily and in a feral manner, licking the blood off his tongue until it healed. They parted as they needed to breathe. However, Shiroy had a different idea, it seemed, as she suddenly bit down on the blonde neck. Naruto didn't know what was going on, but on instinct he bit down on Shiroy's neck. After several moments, Shiroy removed herself from his neck, and she gave off a pleased growl at the small, spiraling twin bats on his neck. Naruto pulled his mouth away from Shiroy's neck, and he was surprised to see a small symbol of the Uzumaki clan, with what appeared to be blades crossing behind it on her neck. Hearing a pleased growl, he turned his head to see Shiroy also looking at the mark. The feral and pleased smile she had on her face was enough to tell him that she was pleased with what he'd done. He didn't have time to complete his thoughts, however, as she caught him in another fierce and passionate kiss with her tongue already demanding an entrance into his moist cave. He complied and opened his mouth for her to enter. Shiroy released a very erotic moan into the kiss, and as she rubbed down on Naruto's third leg, with the blonde groaning with her, she slowly pulled away a trail of saliva connecting them. She licked off the saliva before she gave Blonde a seductive and seducing grin. "Naruto Kun, after tonight, we are going to be true lovers," she said as she unhooked her bra. Naruto only had thought running through his head best birthday ever. He thought before he pulled Shiry in for another kiss. Their neighbors would be having noise complaints the entire night. Not that they cared. With every step away from the familiar, Naruto ventures deeper into the unknown. What challenges and surprises await him beyond the horizon? Will love be the anchor that grounds him, or the force that propels him further? Stay with us on Anime T23 for the next exciting chapter in Naruto's journey. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update